Testing, testing, testing. Yes. We're about to begin, everyone. Nicole, do you mind asking everybody to join us inside? Thank you. Well, to our Zoom virtual audience, we apologize for the delay. It is raining a bit in DC, and so we're a little behind. Thank you, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Florida International University's DC space. I'm Clev Messador. I'm the Executive Director for the Blockchain Foundation, and I'm thrilled to have you here for our Financial Literacy and Risk Education Symposium. Risk is something we've been leaning into since last year. It's something that we think is important to actually integrate in terms of how we actually build this industry. Today, you're going to hear from speakers across the spectrum, some from government, some from industry, but also advocacy groups that are actually leading some of this work, and some from academia as well. The Blockchain Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. We focus on education exclusively. Now, what does that mean? That means we are focused on accessibility while the industry may be focused on adoption. That means our goal is to make sure the public has access to trusted content from reputable sources. Now, I do want to thank Florida International University for hosting us today. And I want to thank again our audience who are joining us virtually. This conversation is quite timely, particularly because of the announcement by the White House on Friday rolling out their risk in cryptocurrency roadmap. We welcome the White House to this conversation. It's a conversation that's been had by the various regulatory agencies. You'll hear from some of them today, a representative from one of them today, and we'll talk about how is government looking at this stuff as well. So as we look at how we deepen this conversation around risk, how it actually is something we look at even from a product development perspective, the Blockchain Foundation will be hosting its inaugural conference in April. As many of you may know, April is Financial Literacy Month, and we will be hosting our inaugural conference here in DC at the MLK Library on April 11th, so please save the date. I do want to welcome Nicole from FIU. She's going to give us some welcome remarks before we dive into the program. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone, welcome for our in-person audience, for our virtual audience. You guys are standing at FIU in DC. We just opened up about 6 months ago, aside from having a presence in DC for over 20 years, but this specific facility. And already in these 6 months, we've had over 10 national conferences and meetings and over 20 smaller and more intimate discussions, 20 to 50. We focus here on showcasing our research. Florida International University as one of the top public universities and top research institutions. It's definitely a good opportunity for you guys to look around. If you have any questions, we're happy to explain further our research topics. But I won't take up too much of your time as we're here to learn more about blockchain. So just wanted to end with a quick master video that will play momentarily. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Nicole. We know that this conversation around financial literacy and risk is very important to some of our champions in Congress. One of them has been Congressman Darren Soto, who is in the leadership of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, but also the Congressional Hispanic Caucus as well. He, unfortunately, due to a conflict, he could not be here personally, but he's joining us virtually. So please stand by for a special message from Congressman Darren Soto.
Different experiences in Central Florida at our world-class theme parks, or down in Miami at the beaches and fine. Hello everyone, I'm Congressman Darren Soto. I want to welcome all of you to Florida International University for the Blockchain Foundation's forum today, and it's all about education and accessibility. We know that education, financial literacy, is critical to making financial decisions, whether it is cryptocurrency or whether it is stocks and bonds or other investments. So knowing that for the future is absolutely key. We know it's been a volatile market as of late in cryptocurrency, so that education will be critical as people make important decisions. Long term, I view the international nature of business in Florida as a right climate to be able to utilize cryptocurrency for international transactions. When I think about in Orlando, the local tourism and travel agent who's helping put together different experiences in Central Florida at our world-class theme parks, or down in Miami at the beaches and fine restaurants of that area, and other areas throughout our state. This is a perfect way to do business across many countries. In addition, it's been helpful in destabilized countries like Venezuela and Ukraine to help out with an ability to have a more stable currency when you have government as the actual enemy of the people in those cases with those dictatorships. So short term, we'll work on financial literacy, and long term, look forward to great discussions about how we can improve international commerce in the great state of Florida. Thank you everybody for coming.
Apologies for the technical difficulties. We do appreciate the congressman's for sharing a message. His office was very disappointed he could not be here and wanted to definitely make sure they actually sent a message from him. So on that note, we will dive into our program. Each of you have on your chairs a copy of the Blockchain Foundation's inaugural report. It's the first in a series where we actually dive into this conversation about financial literacy. Financial literacy is not something you can add to, because there are brilliant people who've been doing a lot of work. What we added to it was providing a compilation of the great work that's being done out there, the legislation that has been passed in 17 states, as well as making the case why digital assets should be part of that conversation. We include policy recommendations that actually get us there. We believe that we need to standardize financial literacy in K-12 schools, but also codify them to ensure equity across America's school system. The dynamic person who did the research for us, Molly Smith, is here. She is going to join us, and we're going to do a quick little fireside chat just about the paper and the process. So please stand by for just a quick conversation. We'll have a Q&A afterwards, so definitely let us know if you have any questions. Testing, okay, testing, okay. Yes, so Molly, you conducted the research for us, which is pretty extensive. There was a lot that's being done. So for you, it was really about the research of the landscape, right? And Monica Talan, who's not here, and I added the crypto piece. So let's start by having you introducing yourself. Tell our in-person and virtual audience a bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I recently graduated with a degree in public health and an emphasis in health promotion, and I've been involved with public health research for about 4.5 years now. And I've done a lot with schools in the past, working with health promotion and education in schools, as well as analyzing nutrition policy across U.S. schools. And then I've also worked on urban planning and how that affects health and health equity in urban areas. And then in the last year, I've become more involved with blockchain technology, fintech, that kind of world, and it's been really interesting to dive into that. And so it was really exciting for me when Clev approached me about the idea of this white paper, because I felt like it gave me the opportunity to kind of bring those two things together, where, you know, like fintech was this really exciting world, and I was looking for ways where that could cross over with public health, and I knew that there were intersections of that, and I felt like this white paper was a really cool opportunity to explore that.
And just so you know, we felt like the researcher mattered. There's a lot of white papers out there. There's a lot of reports out there. But we wanted this to come from the vantage point of the generation we're talking about, right? The goal is to make sure that we're equipping the next generation, millennials and Zoomers. And Molly is not just a Zoomer, right? She just experienced what we're talking about in K-12 schools. So Molly, tell us a bit about your vantage point, right? You're new to crypto, so you're not like a crypto fanatic. Oh, I'm definitely a crypto fanatic. But, you know, for you, you know, crypto is just part of, you know, the toolbox, right? So please share a bit more about this perspective, being a Zoomer, being new to crypto, how it actually, you know, helped you to do this research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like Clev said, I wouldn't say that I'm, you know, so pro-crypto, so anti-crypto. I feel like more over the last year, what's become really clear to me is that crypto is just a part of the financial markets at this point. Like, it's just something that I'm going to interact with. It's going to be here. It's here to stay. And so doing this research, one thing that was really obvious to me was that a lot of these courses are very outdated. Like, thinking back to my experience in high school and the courses that I took, I remember learning how to balance a checkbook, and I've never written a check in my life. It's just not that applicable to me and in this generation, whereas things like crypto and fintech in general, they're going to be a part of the market that I interact with. And so thinking about, you know, what these courses should be as new courses are rolling out across the country, I think that it's really important that the courses that we're teaching kids in high schools are reflective of the market now and not the market 20 or 30 years ago, which is kind of the point that we're at right now with the courses.
Yeah, and in the paper, we identified 17 states that now mandate financial literacy, and you attended high school in one of those states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I attended high school in Virginia, and that's one of the schools that they are required to have us take financial literacy. So I did take a financial literacy course, and I was really surprised because I did well in the course. I felt like I worked hard. I was like, you know, pretty good with my budget in college. I thought I was financially savvy. And then I graduated, and I realized that after almost 2 decades in the education system, I felt like I was almost financially illiterate walking out into the workforce. Like, I didn't understand very well how to build credit or try to put my money in a bank or a credit union or, you know, into crypto or into stocks. Like, I didn't have a great gauge of how to interact and how to interface with the financial markets and the offerings that were in front of me. And then on top of that, having the financial market have evolved so much since I was in high school, it felt really intimidating to step in and feel like I just was supposed to learn the rules of the game by playing when it felt like everyone around me already knew the rules. And so I think that we need to do a way better job at looking at what these courses are and making sure it's actually preparing kids for the real world instead of just having them jump through these hoops that we've mandated for schools.
And the reality is there's a financial literacy deficiency across America, right, regardless of age or race or socioeconomic status. And one of the things that we talked about, you know, as you mentioned, you know, even the fact that you were lucky to be in a state that mandated this education, but the education you received didn't even prepare you. And one of the things that we talked about was, you know, the adoption, crypto adoption is primarily among young people, right? especially when you look at millennials and Zoomers. But oftentimes their first interaction or engagement, right, is outside a space where they're getting trusted content, right? So instead of being exposed to it in school or in a setting where they're getting accurate information, it may just be with a random's YouTube saying, you have to buy right now.
Yeah, that was definitely my experience where when I was in college, I had friends that were putting money into crypto and they just said, if you put money in, you're going to get a bunch out. You need to do this. And it was just kind of this like thing that none of us understood that you were supposed to throw your money into. And that was my first exposure to it. And I think for most students, the question is not going to be if they're introduced to blockchain technology, if they're introduced to crypto. It's going to be when and how they're introduced. And so I think that keeping that out of the curriculum in the school system isn't benefiting kids in any way. I think that putting it in there and allowing that to be kids' first exposure is in an unbiased way where they just can learn about what it is the best way to teach this to kids, because obviously it's not going to be right for everyone, but I think when you're just asked to engage with it blindly and decide if it's right or not for you with no education and no foundation in knowing what it is, it's really hard to make those sort of decisions. And I feel like that was my experience, was not knowing, am I missing out on something big? Is this something that I should know a lot about? And you see ads running for it and you see your friends are all putting money into it. And I think that the best thing we can do for kids to arm them with the skills to interact with these markets is to educate them young and in an unbiased way and in a safe classroom environment.
Yeah, because we need to make sure people have access to trusted content from reputable sources, but we have to decide how we do that, right? And especially for young people, academic institutions are the best access points for them. Now let's dive into the research a little bit, right? So again, I encourage everyone to take a look at the data. The amount of time Mali spent pulling, one of the things I think people will be interested in is the 17 states that do mandate it. State legislatures had to pass the law. So in the paper is a summary of each state and their law, but also the bill number as well. So as you're looking at how the legislation varied, and you actually looked at that from the analysis perspective. But let's talk about some of the interesting findings, right? While 17 states mandate a personal financial course to graduate, 23 states actually say you should offer it, right? It's not a mandate for graduation. And so based on that, we do know that this year, about 23% of students in K-12 schools, at least in high school, will have access to some type of financial education. That's not a bad thing, right? But that means more than 75% of students will not, right? They will not have any. So this is interesting, right? Because we run the risk of inequity, right? When states that can will help get curriculum better, but some states will be left behind. Interestingly, one of the interesting things I saw was Mississippi is one of the states that is actually leading. Mississippi is among the 17 states that actually require for you to take a personal financial course to graduate. But New York State is not the financial capital of the world. So, one of the policy recommendations that we talked about. So Molly was convinced that she couldn't come up with policy recommendations. So I sort of forced her into it. And that's why our policy recommendations are a little creative. But I came up with the crypto ones. But for you, it was really about the need to standardize the curriculum, but also to codify it across all 50 states so that we don't have this inequity, right? So that we don't have a case where, yes, 23% of students have access, but 75% don't.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference when you just offer it in schools versus when it's required in schools. I mean, looking at the data, when it's offered in schools, 1 out of 10 kids takes the course, which is really, really low. And then even more concerning, when I was looking at it, 1 out of 20 kids in areas where the school districts are higher in people of color or higher in students that are on free or reduced price lunches. And so that to me really emphasized the point that in these communities where there's lower financial literacy or where these kids are coming from households where their parents aren't as financially literate, it's not emphasized to them. They end up passing on these courses, and then this wealth gap continues to grow where these kids who are coming from healthier financial situations take advantage of these courses and become educated. And I think that was just really, really concerning to me. And it really emphasizes the point that if we're not mandating it in schools, then most of these students are going to miss out on the opportunity, even though this is really an essential skill. And then I think another point that just kept coming back to me as I was doing this research was the fact that these kids who are in lower income school districts often are at a much higher rate matriculating right into the workforce at 18 years old, and they need to have all these skills immediately as an 18-year-old, and there's no other opportunity to learn it except for in the high school. So if 9 out of 10 of them or 19 out of 20 of them are missing out on it, then we're really missing the boat.
In our paper, we call for mayors and governors to lead the way on this, but we do know that there's action at the federal level as well. So later today, you're going to hear from Senator Carson's or Andre Carson's office. They actually have a legislation to actually focus on financial literacy in K-12 schools that calls on the CFPB to actually take action. So later today, Kevin from Congressman Carson's office will dive into that. So Molly, what else is interesting about, before we take a few questions, because our next speaker is here, what else is interesting that you want people to make sure they check out in the paper?
I think there's a lot. I think one thing that stood out to me was just how much this curriculum is varying state to state, and that's in there. I think there's just a lot of interesting data points looking at how many students are engaging with crypto. Like, for example, 42% of people 18 to 34 have either traded crypto or used crypto. You see that a lot of parents are saying that they want their kids to learn about this. You see that a lot of students feel like they know more than their parents about it, which is worrisome because they don't know that much either. And so I think that there's a lot in there, just kind of underlining that point that we need to be improving these courses and that we need to be making it so that all of students have access to them, and it's not just something offered, but it's something mandated.
And as we open up for questions, I do want to highlight one of the interesting things about the curriculum. So we have a section on the curriculum, right? So I called it, it's the curriculum stupid, because I'm old and I remember the Clinton
Online as a question? Should I just blast it
economy.
out over the mic or something?
Molly, who is a Zoomer, pushed back on the reference, like, oh.
No, not yet. I'm just saying if.
Really the best reference, and I thought, well, most of the people who will be reading this paper are old like me, so they'll get there. But it was one of those things in terms of the intergenerational pieces. How do we make this relevant, right? Because this is for policymakers and advocates, right? But we want it to be relevant for young people as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions?
Say, is there a finance industry coalition that's funding standardized current financial literacy curriculum? Effectively, is there a way that the finance industry itself can come together?
Well, yes. So there are lots of groups that are actually focused on financial literacy broadly, and we mentioned quite a bit of them. There's Jumpstart, but within the financial space as well, a lot of the big banks and fintechs do have different curriculum. So financial literacy, as I opened up, right, there's nothing new underneath the sun. There are tons of people who've been tackling this, and obviously, just like everything we've been working on for the last 50 years, that the outcomes haven't improved. But I think we have the industry as well as advocates are working on this. I think the only thing that changed, the reason we have 17 states is because young people started demanding it. What we saw the last decade is young people showing up at city council meetings and saying, this is ridiculous. And I think that was a game changer.
Yeah, I agree. I think most of my generation is pretty aware that we're entering a really complex system and we have to have education or we're just not going to know the rules of the game.
Any other questions? But Molly is around and feel free. Oh, apologies.
Thank you so much for your time today, Molly. Since you were recently in school and you took personal finance classes, now that you're out of school, looking back, where do you think curriculum could have been a little bit better to adapt to some of the situations that you face in the workforce now?
Yeah, I think the first part of that would just be eliminating some of those pieces that are just not going to be relevant to us. Like I talked about, like balancing a checkbook. I've never had to do it. I don't really think it's going to come up a lot in my life. I think we could do a lot better job at just covering some of these basic pieces that you interact with your first time in the workforce. Things like a 401k, things like building your own credit. I don't think we need to dive as deep into things like stocks and how to play the market in that way. But I do think we need to have the basics of when you're being pulled in these different directions, this is what these terms mean. This is what you need, right out of the gate. You need to understand your 401k and your savings and things like that. And then these higher level terms are things that you can learn more about as you have more time to look into those things. You can take college courses on them and things like that.
And one point we make in the paper is that the core need to reconcile accounts is important, right? And that was at the heart of balancing a checkbook, right? But we're still teaching people how to balance a physical checkbooks, and we know that the medium, right, the vehicle is no longer the same. The instrument they're using, whether it be a fintech app or a crypto wallet, or just your 401k account, right? We have to innovate, but the core principle of needing to teach people how to reconcile their accounts is important, and it's critical to financial literacy. It's just the vehicle, right? It hasn't changed.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these vehicles are pretty intuitive once you know that they're there and you're able to use them. But even that, I think that we miss out on in the school system, just teaching. Everything's become digitized. It's all there for you. A lot of it is straightforward. It just knowing where to go and what are the pieces that you first need to engage with right out of the gate when you start out of school into the workforce. I think that's a really important part of this.
And later today, you'll hear from Delicia Hand from Consumer Reports, because they're thinking about how these products are being built and how, should financial literacy be part of that, and how do we assess them for risks. So thank you, Molly, and great job on the report. We're thrilled. And we're actually starting to think about our next one. We'll be looking at, the need to modernize and also resource credit unions, CDFIs, and minority banks so that they can get out of the 19th century and come into the 21st century when it comes to banking, but also, have the capacity for digital assets, because working class people are the earliest adopters, communities of color, and they're not going to Bank of America, but they are going to the local minority bank. They're going to their credit union. So the institutions on the front line don't have the resources to meet the demand. So thank you, everyone. And so our next speaker is, I don't even think my mic is working. So our next speaker is one of the members of the board of directors for the Blockchain Foundation. She is also the CEO of the Blockchain Association. Kristen Smith has been, oh my God, she's been a tremendous mentor, confidant, and supporter of the work that I've been leading on financial inclusion since 2019, since before anybody thought it was anything. So we're thrilled to have her on the board of directors of the Blockchain Foundation. Actually, it was her and our board members, Josh Mendelson, Katie Biber, who last year recognized that the industry needed to shift focus to education. And I was thrilled that they empowered me to actually lead the foundation. So without any delay, Kristen Smith from the Blockchain Association.
Should I use this one? Is this one better? Okay, we'll just set this one here if that's okay. Hi, thank you, Clev. Clev doesn't realize, well, she does realize this, but I'm going to modify her origin story a little bit. So the Blockchain Foundation as an entity was actually created 4.5 years ago, and it just sat there for years on end. And it was through our work on financial inclusion and DEI at the Blockchain Association with Clev that we realized one day, Clev needs a bigger, better platform. We have this organization that has, no funding, no people behind it. Let's hand that to Clev. And I just want to say I'm so excited to see all that you have done with the foundation in such a short amount of time, and I'm super excited to be a part of this event today. So Clev, you have been just phenomenal in the work that you've been doing, and I'm excited to see what you do. And I also want to congratulate Mally Smith for all of her work that she put into helping out with this report here today. My day job is representing the crypto industry in Washington, which, as you could imagine, in the past, since year or so, it's been certainly a challenging time because we have seen a lot of behavior that is fraudulent. We've seen a lot of misunderstanding about what it means to put trust in some third parties that are operating in the crypto space. And I think, now more than ever, both from the financial literacy perspective, but also from understanding risk. These are concepts and topics that have become more important than ever. And I think, when I think about what is the role with crypto assets in financial literacy generally, I sort of think, you kind of need two pieces, I think, in order to do financial literacy education in the correct way. One of those pieces is you have to have the right curriculum. You have to make it understandable and accessible and available to everyone, I think, starting at, the very earliest of ages. I also think you have to have an interest and an incentive on behalf of the student in order to want to understand why they need to learn this and for them to want to learn this. And I think about even being like a little kid in elementary school. I don't know if anybody's in like my generation, but we used to go to the computer lab and we would do Mavis Beacon teaches typing. And I hated going to the computer lab to do Mavis Beacon teaches typing because you'd have to sit there and, it was on these like old computers and disk drives and things like that. And like even in high school when I had to type up a paper, it was like the most arduous task because I didn't want to learn to type. Well, then I get into college and there was this like AOL Instant Messenger. I learned to type like that. I was like a typing machine because all of a sudden I had friends who were I could communicate with. Like it was valuable to me. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I think Mally cited this statistic, is when you look at digital assets, whether it be crypto assets or NFTs, you really you see a lot of people, particularly in the younger generations, that want to be a part of this ecosystem. They want to trade these assets. They want to own these assets. And I think there's like a really interesting synergy there because crypto can be a forcing mechanism for students to want to learn about financial literacy, to learn those sort of core skills and fundamental ideas. But at the same time, you also have really unique things in the crypto space that are very different than traditional financial services that also need to be understood. So it's understanding the role of self-custody versus working with, sort of an exchange or a custodian. And it's really some of these core ideas that we see in the traditional financial services that crypto can help to illuminate. So, I'm so happy and excited for the work that Clev is doing. I think, on part of the industry, we've got some work to do in order to ensure that we weed out some of the bad actors in this space. I think there are there's a lot of phenomenal companies that are trying to facilitate consumers' use of digital assets, and they're doing it in a smart and thoughtful way. But unfortunately, that has not been a universal situation. So I think that this year is really a time to double down on education, whether it be with consumers, with students, or with policymakers here in Washington. And so maybe with that, I don't think I used all of my time, Clev, but I might just quit while I'm ahead and hand it back to you, or happy to take any questions if anybody has any. But I know there's a more exciting programming to come. So thank you very much, Clev.
Thank you, Kristen. I always struggle in the official engagements where they ask me how old the foundation is. Technically, this March will make a year, but technically, we're going on 5 years. Yes. But thank God we had the vehicle, so for when we needed it, we could actually just jump right in. So thank you, Kristen, and the board. I will tell you, for the financial literacy paper, this was a huge priority for our board to really look at this specific issue and really help to actually, move it forward a bit. So we're heading into an important fireside chat. So a lot of universities get credit for the work that they're leading, obviously MIT, Stanford, and the like. But we have an HBCU that has been doing this work for almost 5 years, and they have a premier fintech and blockchain center that the industry actively engages, but they don't get the visibility that they want, that they should get, I should say. So Morgan State University not only has a fintech and blockchain center, they actually do an annual conference on crypto every year. This past year, CFTC Commissioner Kristen Johnson was among the speakers, but they also had a HBCU President's Summit as part of their conference, where they actually engaged presidents of other HBCUs. But what's interesting about Morgan is that they also give grants to other HBCUs for them to set up their blockchain programs, but also for faculty to do research, things like carbon credits. And so during the conference, a lot of the professors present the research that they're doing at the intersection of blockchain and fintech. So I'm going to call up our moderator, Janae Eo. She is currently the Director of Financial Policy at Chamber of Progress, which is a center-left tech policy trade association advocating for consumer-supporting technological leaps in our society. Previously, she worked for Congresswoman Joyce Beatty in the House Financial Services Committee, and specifically the subcommittee that focused on DEI. She is brilliant and has been doing great work at Chamber of Progress, and she will be introducing our speaker, Dr. Emdad from Morgan State. So Janae, Dr. Emdad, please join us.
All right, can you all hear me? All right, well, today I am here sitting, thank you, Cleb, for that wonderful introduction. Today I'm here sitting with the Dr. Emdad from the Graves Business School at Morgan State University, and also the director of the National FinTech Center. I just wanted to start off with a quick bio for him so you all know who he is. He is currently the Associate Dean of the Earl G. Graves School of Business and Management at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. He oversees all daily operations in the Graves School and assists the dean in setting the vision and strategic priorities for the school. He is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Blockchain and Financial Technology, also known as the FinTech Center, where he manages a multi-year, multi-million-dollar grant received from Ripple in February 2019. Previously, he served as the founding chair of the Department of Information Science and Systems in the Graves School, where he holds the rank of full professor with tenure. Dr. Emdad provided leadership for the department's growth and addition of new programs, including the BS in Supply Chain Management, the MS in Project Management, the Post-Baccalaureate Certificate in Project Management, and the Information Systems track in the PhD program in Business Administration. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Emdad. The work that you're doing as the Associate Dean is so important and very relevant to the conversation that we have going on today with the release of this current report. But could you start us off with a brief history of the center and how you've gained support from corporations and government throughout the years?
Thank you. Thank you, Janae, and thank you, Cliff, for inviting me to be part of this event. I'm really humbled to be with such a group of experts here, all from different areas of the industry, and also your kind introduction, Janae. Thank you. I've been at Morgan for 32 years. I was at Penn State before I moved to Morgan, and I saw opportunity for growth, for development of talents that we have. And over the years, we focused on student development. And the center idea started with the students showing interest in crypto in 2016 and 2017. We decided to create a number of events to inform the students about the crypto market in general, blockchain, understanding of how they can set up wallets and how they can actually learn and create portfolio and how to apply, how to work in the blockchain industry. In 2018, we created with the support of the university, we created the Center for the Study of Blockchain and Financial Technology, or the FinTech Center, we called it. And in 2019, we were fortunate to receive a grant from Ripple, and we were among about 15 Ivy Leagues that received the funding. And at that point, it was just the funding was just for the Morgan State University. And over several months, we were able to convince Ripple that all the other HBCUs are important to be part of this process of learning about this new fintech and crypto and blockchain industry. And we were fortunate to receive additional funding, and we became a hub for all the other HBCUs in terms of outreach, programs in research and education. And so with that, we started in our programming. We received funding at the end of February of 2019. And in April, we offered the first summit, and we brought in 34 HBCUs from around the country, about 130, 40 faculty, and some student leaders came. And that became the beginning of really a good network, a robust network of interested people in this space. And then unfortunately, the pandemic hit. You know the rest of the story. We had to go virtual, and our programming became virtual, and we offered at least, I remember, 16 different programs, webinars, workshops, with participation of sometimes 400, 500 people from different HBCUs. And we created a database of over 2,000 faculty and student leaders at over 60 different HBCUs. And we constantly are in touch with them, and they participate in our events. We became, in 2021, we became an associate member of Hyperledger Foundation. And with that, we have been really aggressively offering workshops and programming in the forefront of all of these innovations. For instance, NFT creation became one of the most popular development workshops that we had in association with a few industry leaders and Hyperledger. I think it was 700 people signed up for it. And then we had workshops on metaverse in 4 parts. And so the programming continued. And what Clive mentioned was we did a number of other programming. For instance, a research program that received a sponsorship from different corporations, and we use that toward funding projects, research projects from different universities. And we also had innovation in education grants available to HBCU faculty when they wanted to do something on their campuses. And because COVID forced every school to close, they had to be innovative in terms of how they program different activities for their faculty and students. Certificate programs and working with IBM, for instance, in issuing certificate in blockchain and some of the other areas became some of the core deliverables for some of the HBCUs. So the programming continues. We have the major event of our program, which is the annual conference, and every year we have that, and I can talk a little bit later on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the work that you're doing with other HBCUs to uplift everyone is so impactful. And, you know, just thinking about the 2022 NBC News poll that was cited in the Blockchain Foundation report, you know, it found that 40% of Black Americans said that they have traded or used crypto, compared to 42% of all people between the ages of 18 and 34. Now, I wanted to ask you, what is the impact of having this FinTech Center at a leading HBCU amongst students and other HBCUs across the country?
I think the most important thing for us has been to inform a rapidly changing landscape, and the space is with new entrants, with different technologies that are coming up every day. It was important for us to put all of that in front of our students and faculty, not only at Morgan, but also at other HBCUs. And having that platform to create the structure to deliver all of this was important. And year after year, we hear from our sponsors that they were searching for an HBCU or some place to go to be able to reach the leaders of HBCUs in this space, and they couldn't find it. And then their research would lead to the National FinTech Center. And so they would come to us and they say, how can we help to have that impact that you're talking about? So for us, it became education as the most important activity and the centerpiece of our work. So we work with different organizations in developing curriculum. Really, the impact on faculty has been enormous as well, because we believe in training the trainers would make it possible for students to be in a classroom where the knowledge is the most recent and the most relevant to what is needed. In 2019, before the pandemic, we took 45 faculty from 30 HBCUs over 3 days in New Orleans in a workshop, and we brought in mentors from Duke and UC Berkeley, Michigan, and with 2 of us from Morgan. We had a training session over 3 days on how to incorporate blockchain understanding into existing courses. And in groups, collaboratively. The faculty developed their courses. When they left, they had the material ready to go on their campuses and teach. So the amplification of that impact was enormous. So our goal, again, is even if we do research, it has to trickle into the education piece that we engage in.
No, thank you so much for that. And I know that what you had mentioned before about connecting students to the opportunities to learn, especially if they're not in STEM-based majors, your program where you have faculty where you show them how to integrate blockchain into their curriculum. I want to know why it's important for all students to understand blockchain technology and its use cases.
Well, I think it's unavoidable to listen to the news, especially technology news, and not hear the word NFT. I mean, it goes up and down in terms of interest and in terms of coverage. But that was one way that we got the art plus NFT technology design competition that is going on right now. At Morgan, with the sponsorship of House of First, which is one of the Morgan grads, came forward with some funding. We're organizing the first art design digital piece that is going to be presented in 3 different categories. And at the end, an NFT is going to be created for each category, and it's going to be auctioned, and the proceeds are going to go toward the artist and toward the art plus technology projects. So it is important. We have faculty from social work. We have faculty from sociology, from various disciplines that are interested now in understanding the space. And it is important for us to make sure that it's not just computer science or entrepreneurship or business or finance that is involved in this. The use cases can be across the campus.
Going back to the report that was just released by Blockchain Foundation, more than 75% of high school graduates will have no exposure to financial literacy education by the time they graduate in 2023. Thinking about digital assets and how nascent of an industry it is, how it's reaching across all generations, from grandparents to my nieces and nephews. Mally had mentioned before, it's not if students are introduced to digital assets, it's when. Thinking about that risk mitigation piece, what can we do to enhance younger people's knowledge on cryptocurrency and how to avoid scams, how to navigate this space?
Again, education. This is part of what we can do at the university through our center. We've been able to bring in, although our focus is on fintech, but we also helped the university develop, as we were starting the center, the university in 2017 made it mandatory for all students. Now, Morgan is about 9,500 students right now. But back then, we had about 7,500, maybe close to 8,000. Every student that enters the university must take a financial literacy course. And it's not optional, it's mandatory. And who brought it to the front? It was the Student Government Association. They wrote a letter to the president. They said, whatever Molly was talking about, that sometimes it has to be organically developed. You can't dictate it, you can't impose it. But when we tell the story to other students that you wanted it and we are offering it. And now we offer, the School of Business offers the financial literacy course to every semester to about 400, 500 students.
Before I jump in, I know I could just chat with you all
Yeah.
day. I used to work at Howard University, so I'm very fascinated with the inner workings of university and how student government works. But I just wanted to open up the floor to you all and ask you all if you had any questions for Dr. Mdad.
Yes?
What types of professional roles are you seeing students going into? I was saying, what types of roles are you seeing students from your centers going into? Are many going into the industry in crypto?
Oh, yes. It depends on who's hiring, and a lot of times, we have partnerships with a dozen different fintech companies. For instance, Ripple hires highly technical students, and we place interns and hires at some of these companies. Some of the others are recruiting in marketing. They want people to be in the back office, for instance, to understand what the crypto space is about, but not necessarily on the development side. So it varies from company to company. And unfortunately, every now and then, students start working at a company, and the company goes through its reorganization or downsizing, and some of the students have to leave because they're the most recent hires. But on the good side is the traditional financial systems hire them, because now they're trying to understand the crypto market. They're trying to understand blockchain. So it has a silver lining also. Oh, you had a question, yeah.
Yes.
And then you.
I have two questions. One is in the conference, so you mentioned the 3-day conference with other universities that came in. What curriculum, what type of classes did you see the professors and other folks there that were using blockchain knowledge to incorporate into their classes? And the second one is a question I think everybody in this space deals with to some degree or another. But how do you find, or how do you try to stay on top of everything that's pertinent to you, to the latest? Because teaching in any capacity that any of us are in, whether it's on the Hill or somewhere else, the educational piece is extremely important, but everything is changing so quickly. And so how do you try to stay on top of it, grad students or other folks doing research with you? And what resources are you using?
Good question. I think one of the important things, again, was when we started the conference, we started with the faculty that we knew that were really active on different campuses. So we reached out to them, and we invited them to join us in course development. And then we found out that from biology, agriculture, economics, finance, information systems, computer science, engineering. These are all the diversity of topics that the faculty were developing their curriculum, their courses. At Morgan, we have at least 7 courses that are that have modules, blockchain modules in them, and 2 dedicated courses. A third one is being developed right now. And on other campuses, other HBCUs, we have the same kind of interest. Some are working with their doctoral students. At the conference, we had comparison of XRP and other crypto was a research project that was really of interest to a lot of people. And there are other things that we do on a regular basis to bring into our conference. In terms of staying up to date, we fund the students. If from the student perspective, we fund the students to take courses, Coursera, Udemy, some of these platforms. Anything that they're interested in, the National FinTech Center supports them. We pay for the registration. We encourage them. Many students have gone and received their certifications from Blockchain Council, for instance, and some of the others. We encourage them to take courses whenever they're free from leaders in the industry. For instance, Chainalysis has been offering some courses, fundamental courses, that they make it available to our students.
Yes, last question.
Oh, okay. It's a two-parter as well. So I'm curious to know, to what extent are you documenting or trying to lead the way of how to do this on a college campus? Because, I know I used to work for NASDAQ, and there were a lot of trading room developments, right? And certain institutions were early in that, and they would form a mentorship with other universities to help them understand how to do that. So to what extent, it sounds like you are doing that, but to what extent are you documenting that to help other universities and colleges expand to have these kinds of centers? And then the other is, are you also conducting research through your center, or are you looking at this more as a implementation center?
We have, thank you for the question. We have documented, and we have helped other universities, whether they're HBCU or non-HBCU. And we've helped them in terms of understanding the process, the components, and what makes something more successful in terms of implementation and expectation. How to get the industry partners involved. And those are the kind of things, a lot of campuses across the country are interested. The students are interested. So it depends on whether you find a champion on each campus that can lead the effort and be willing to accept sometimes failure, accept learning from failure, and move on to the next phase. And be more successful. So that's important. So that's, it's an ongoing thing. We don't say we don't have any bias toward anyone, but we believe that the industry can support us if we reach out to other universities as well. I want to say this. Our mission is so unique. When you look at all other universities, when they have centers, their focus is more or less limited to their campus. Whatever funding they have, it's for their own faculty, to improve research on their own campus. With the National FinTech Center is different. We have a network of 60 different HBCUs that we provide service to. So that by itself separates our mission from the others.
Thank you all so much for your questions from the audience, and I want to also thank you, Dr. Amdad, for being able to chat with us today this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Janae. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for listening and your interest. Thank you.
I'm always in awe of the amazing work that is happening at Morgan, and thank you, Dr. Mdad, for your leadership, and also for engaging the university, the industry, to actually be part of this as well. So, as Janae mentioned, my alma mater, Howard University, is tackling these issues also, but not in the way that Morgan is leading. And obviously, we're here at Florida International University. I can tell you they are doing a lot on fintech and crypto. They actually have a leading computer science program that their graduates, are leading industries. But we couldn't get their folks here for this one. So April 11th, we will have FIU's faculty and researchers who are leading on the blockchain crypto space. So now we're opening up to our panel. So I'm going to have our panelists join us here. We're going to lean into this whole conversation about financial literacy in the age of digital assets. So please welcome Dan Rutherford from CFTC, Ashley Scott from Circle, and Chloe Bars from Robinhood. Well, I'm very excited about this panel because the industry has actually been doing quite a bit on financial literacy, and so in terms of leading programs, educational programs on their own, but also building their own library. Clark, who you'll hear from later from Chain Analysis, they actually built their own library. And when we were thinking about doing a library for the Blockchain Foundation, she connected me with their engineers. So, but at the federal level, this is something that that the regulatory agencies are thinking about as well in terms of education. So today I'm thrilled to bring together these leaders just to talk through how we are approaching financial literacy in the age of digital assets. So as I mentioned, Dan Rutherford is the Associate Director of Consumer Outreach at the CFTC. Ashley next to me is the Senior Director of Global Policy at Circle. And Chloe is the Director of External Affairs and Community at Robinhood. I'm going to have them each open up by sharing a bit more about their background and also, their companies and the work that they're doing there. So why don't we start with you, Chloe?
Sure. Oh, I have a mic. Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe Bars. As Clev mentioned, I'm the Director of External Affairs and Community at Robinhood, where our mission is to democratize finance for all. So Robinhood is a digital finance platform where we offer access to various asset classes, including traditional securities as well as cryptocurrencies. And my role at the company is to lead our partnerships and programming, including those around crypto education, which I will speak a bit further to with you all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Rutherford. I'm with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission's Office of Customer Education and Outreach, and I probably have the longest title here. So, and also before I get started, let me just say from the outset that any views or opinions that I'll present today will be my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Commission, the Chairman, or any individual commissioners. My background, I started as a financial journalist. And I made the transition to online back in 1998. So I like to tell people I've been around about as long as the web browser. I joined, got into financial literacy, basically on the job, doing, learning and doing as I was reporting on stories, and eventually, made the transition to FINRA and the FINRA Foundation, and that was my entry to financial education, and then to the CFPB, worked there for a few years, and then made the transition to the CFTC. For those who are unfamiliar, the CFTC regulates the derivatives markets in the U.S. We do not have regulatory authority over spot markets. And so when we talk about Bitcoin and the transactions that take place on centralized platforms, those occur on the cash market. And so our regulatory authority there is limited primarily to fraud and other violations of the Commodity Exchange Act, mostly manipulation and those sorts of things. In my role at CFTC, I'm also the chairman's delegate to the Financial Literacy Education Commission, which was started back in 2003 to sort of coordinate a national strategy around financial education. And as part of my work with FLEC, I started and lead a digital asset group where we're working to sort of coordinate our approach to education around digital assets.
Hi, I am Ashley Scott. I am the Senior Director of Global Policy at Circle. Circle, we are an internet native payments infrastructure company that's powered by blockchain. We are also the issuer of the largest US regulated stablecoin, USD coin. Essentially what our goal is to do is to be able to send money as easy or as fast as the speed of the internet, right? As easy as an email. We just make a digital dollars I feel like during crypto and blockchain conversations, a lot of times we can use nomenclature that could cause all the stars to circle our heads. So I try to use language that's just easy to understand and identify. And I think that's a great transition into what we do at Circle. Circle, we believe in financial access and financial inclusion, and that the very baseline of that is just having education, right? And knowing what your options are, knowing what blockchain is, what is a stable coin, what's the difference between Bitcoin and ETH, what is a layer 1 versus a layer 2 protocol. And so when we talk about financial literacy, I think it really connects to my background. I've worked in the transportation space, I've worked in the housing space, I've worked in local government, and at the ground floor of all of that is dissemination of information. And so now being in the financial services and sector space, I'm doubling down on dissemination of information because it is one-to-one tied to your ability to propel yourself in society, right? Knowing what programs, what's an FHA loan, right? What's a small business loan? What areas of government offers grants? And so we're trying to do that the same way in the crypto space. What's the resource? How do you utilize it? How can you use it for your own good, or maybe make the decision that's not how a part of your portfolio that you want? So really excited about this conversation.
And this conversation is going to go into the different, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Yes. It is on? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, for those of you who, for our virtual audience who have missed Ashley's background, we will be sharing the bios tomorrow with all our participants. But Ashley has a tremendous background, especially across a lot of sectors, and I think that's what's interesting about this panel, because these are not folks who are born bred in crypto, right? They come to crypto for a body of knowledge and expertise from various areas that actually have led them to figure out how to implement in a way that's practical. So now let's go into how each of your organizations are tackling education and financial literacy. Dan, let's start with you, because you mentioned FLEC and you mentioned it lightly, but please share a bit about what is FLEC, what does it do, and digital assets recently became part of the conversation.
Yes. So I'll refer to my notes so I get everything right. The Financial Literacy Education Commission was established under the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act of 2003. It's a commission made up of, right now, 24 government agencies that each have some element of financial literacy as part of their mission. Now, the complicating issues, you can imagine working with 24 government agencies, is that each have their own distinct mission, and each agency is only allowed to do what Congress authorizes them to do. So it really does take an all-hands-on-deck approach when we're talking about digital assets, because what may apply to the SEC in terms of securities and regulating around securities markets may not necessarily apply to digital commodities, because they're not securities. If they're consumer products, that might fall under another agency. If it's dealing with banks or stable coins, it might fall under a different agency. And so, we spend some of our time thinking about, well, what can we teach under the authorities that we have? Again, the group that I started, or that I helped organize, started at the end of 2021. And so if you can remember back to those great days in November before the market turned the other way, there was a lot of excitement around DeFi. There was a lot of things going on. There were a lot of people jumping in and a lot of people being defrauded. And, I went to my colleagues and said, hey, this is going to touch all of us. And we really do need to sort of expose ourselves to this. And what I learned, not only within the government agencies, but with a lot of the financial counselors, a lot of the community organizations that we work with, a lot of the adult educators in workplace and elsewhere, just like, the faculty members at the HBCUs, and just like, teachers in grade school and high school, people don't know a lot about digital assets and how they function, how they work. And so one of our primary goals was to educate those government educators and get them talking the same language and feeling comfortable having that conversation and dealing with that. We're also looking at, not only who's in what swim lane and what we can each talk about, but also how do we coordinate the language? Because we have some people talking about digital assets, some people talking about crypto assets, some people talking about cryptocurrency, some people talking about tokens and coins. And that just adds to the confusion. And so we're trying to get everyone together to sort of talk from the same set of terminology, right? So we're all singing from the same hymnal, so to speak. We're also going to be looking at and tackling some sort of awareness campaign, and how do we engage between the public, private sectors, nonprofit organizations, and how do we get everybody involved in raising awareness specifically around risks? And, that's really, when we talk about education, especially financial literacy, we don't want to get to the point, we don't want to misdirect people or encourage people to jump into the market, right? Because right now, if you look at a lot of the material that's online, it's about onboarding, it's about adoption. And we don't want to push people into the market, but we want them to think about, does this fit into my overall financial life, and how much, right? Do I have an emergency savings account? Do I have too much debt at a high interest rate? Am I able to make my daily and weekly living expenses? Am I saving for retirement, for my kids' college? Then maybe I have a little money that I can speculate with. And when we're talking about digital assets, when we're talking about Bitcoin, it's supported only by speculation at this point. And so, you are dealing with speculative trading. And so where does that fit in? How much can you afford to lose? And that's really the conversation that we want to have people focusing on.
It's interesting because FLEC as a commission has been around for a while, and their meetings are actually broadcast. I believe they're quarterly, right?
Yeah, we have I think are required to have 3 public meetings a year, I believe.
Yeah, and so I remember there was one I tuned in for. I believe it was last year or maybe the year before, where there was a lot of concern about access to trusted content, right? What the industry was sharing, and there was an assessment that a lot of the industry was sharing information about fees and how to buy, and that was the education perspective we were coming from. And I really wanted to, for the foundation, lean into what companies are actually broadening the conversation and making it really about the fundamentals, right? About the basics, making sure that people just understand, regardless of how to use maybe their specific protocol or application. So we'll start with you, Chloe. Chloe, on Robinhood, because Robinhood has been, doing quite a bit, and you just launched Opportunity Crypto.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Clem. And I think similar to what Dan just spoke to, Robinhood is dedicated to really painting that comprehensive picture of this asset class and ensuring that consumers have the information they need to decide if this is something they want to get involved in. So this was very front of mind for us in 2022 when we launched a program called Opportunity Crypto. Which, in line with Robinhood's mission to democratize finance for all, was really aimed at ensuring that underserved communities weren't left behind with this innovative new asset class, that they were able to get the same education around what this was for folks who don't have a financial advisor. So Opportunity Crypto is a series of crypto education-specific workshops that we hosted in cities around the country that is geared towards anyone who's ever asked, what is crypto, to is crypto right for me? So these workshops highlighted basic concepts such as what is a digital asset, to discussing different cryptocurrencies, highlighting different use cases of blockchain technology, as well as discussing how to avoid fraud in this quickly evolving industry. So again, being sure to really highlight that comprehensive view of what this industry looks like. So something I'm particularly proud about with this program is we conducted surveys with all of the attendees following the workshops, and we were really thrilled to hear that 90% of attendees of the Opportunity Crypto workshops reported that they had an increased understanding and knowledge of what cryptocurrency was following that workshop. Which is just great. But I think what's even more remarkable is that 100% of attendees, every single attendee reported that they had an increased interest in learning more about how to manage and take ownership of their personal finances, which I think is just a great outcome for these workshops that Robinhood customers and non-customers alike who participated in these workshops were interested in finding resources, whether that's through Robinhood channels or elsewhere, to learn more about how to take control of their personal finances. So we're really excited to continue Opportunity Crypto in 2023 and scale it to even more cities this year.
And it was wonderful that you partnered with Charlene.
That's right. Charlene Federepo with Mango Digital Strategies served as the educator for these workshops. So it was wonderful working with her. Yeah.
Now, Ashley, tell us about the work that you've been doing with Circle Impact. I know a lot of you know Dante Desparte, who works, with you at Circle, and I know this was a big priority for Dante to launch this. So tell us a bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, Circle Impact is our corporate responsibility arm of Circle, where there are 3 core pillars: financial inclusion, financial literacy, and humanitarian aid. I think taking a note from my transportation background, right? In the transportation space, you often talk about transportation deserts. Lack of resources, lack of access, lack of ability to move around. And so we came from that same mindset that although transportation deserts are very much a tangible thing, you can have financial deserts, right? Where there's a lack of education, a lack of financial resources towards in particular communities or underrepresented groups. And so what we understood, and particularly taking from many of our backgrounds, is that you don't have to recreate the wheel. What really this work calls for is finding organizations that already have established trust in communities and bringing your resources to them and doing great partnerships. So within that, we have partnerships with a number of HBCUs, including Howard University, which I'm sure has gotten a number of shout outs already throughout the course of this program, where we are working with college students and they go through are Circle U, so Circle University, which is, think about a Coursera course where you have 6 to 8 modules, but within that education, and I think goes to what you're saying, it's not propaganda, right? It goes from how do we get to being a financial system that leans on fiat money, right? Going from the bartering and using that as our financial system all the way to how we got to the establishment of the US dollar. Then understanding why was there a call or an interest to reconfigure current financial systems. What makes me really excited about this is I think financial literacy and financial inclusion actually are very much married, right? The more you know, the more included you can be within growing financial systems and innovative systems. And so I think what makes me really excited hearing what Chloe is doing at Robinhood and what we're doing here at Circle is that many, and this is not a knock, traditional financial institutions were called to this work through legislation, right? Just when it comes to consumer protection, when it comes to financial disclosures, legislative acts that calls for attention to underrepresented and underserved communities. But what I am most proud of is that we are a industry that's very much in its infancy. And a lot of work has gone into making sure there's a broad swath of people that can participate in the space. We're, a 7-year-old company, but we've made this financial investment to not only educate, but include, because at the end of Circle U, you have an opportunity to get an internship at Circle as well. So you're not only educated, but able to participate in the ecosystem. And that's something that it's not only Circle. There are a number of different companies that are doing this, not being regulated to do this, but honestly wanting to create a more inclusive financial system.
It's wonderful that the work that's being done by each of your organizations. I tell people that the foundation is focused on accessibility while the industry is focused on adoption. But let's define accessibility. For us, accessibility means they have access to the information, they have access to understanding so that they could make a decision. Because the more options people have, the more inclusive money becomes. And we make no assumption that crypto is for everyone or should be for everyone, but we do think that people should have the knowledge, be informed to make that decision on their own. And when people don't have access to information, they're denied a choice that they should have. Now, I do want to turn this conversation a little deeper around this issue of risk and mitigating risk. So, Dan, I know that's something that you think about not just in your role, with the Financial Literacy and Education Commission, but also at the CFTC as well. So let's talk a bit more about consumer risk.
Great. I think the big thing to keep in mind. So in my office, again, we're ruled by appropriations, right? I have an appropriation that limits me. It's collected through enforcement actions. So the money that funds my office comes from people that get caught doing bad things. But that limits my mission to focus on fraud and violations of the Act, right, of the Commodity Exchange Act. So my focus is primarily on fraud. That means I spend a lot of time, unfortunately, listening to and seeing and looking at the complaints that people bring to us. And it's really tragic, when someone submits a complaint and, they received a errant text and they responded to it because, the person was looking for someone else, but it turned out that they made a friend. And, over time, maybe they started chatting more and more and got on Telegram together. And it turns out that this very attractive young woman is very wealthy. And she, she got that way because she invested in cryptocurrency through this platform that operates overseas somewhere. And lo and behold, she can teach you how to do this, right? And you invest a little bit of money, and she says, well, take a little bit out and go spend it on yourself. So you make a small withdrawal and think, hey, this works. This is okay. Let me invest more. And then she encourages you to invest more. Cash out that 401k because it's not earning you anything. You can earn 15, 20, 25%. You could double your money. And people do. Okay? And so I think when we talk about accessibility, it's really about education catching up to where we are with social media, with the ability to interact and engage on your phone 24/7, online 24/7, and having that conversation around information literacy as well as financial literacy is really key. And it's when you get caught up in a fraud or when you're introduced to a fraud, you may not necessarily see the red flags. But if I were to talk to Ashley and say, hey, I met this girl online, we just got this strange text out of the blue, and lo and behold, 6 months later, now I'm sending her my 401k money. She could say, hey, Dan, that sounds like a pretty dumb idea to me.
Or a 90-Day Fiancé episode.
Exactly, yeah. So, it's not only about, educating kids and educating, students, but it's also educating each other and staying tuned in to what the current frauds are, how they're being perpetrated, how can we as financial education professionals engage with community organizations, with libraries, where people go, and especially in underserved communities where that may be the only access they have to Wi-Fi. So where are the potential intervention points? What information could we put out to help inform those folks? And, how can we prevent some of these things from happening? So we see a lot of romance frauds. We see a lot of friendship frauds. In fact, the FTC put out some information recently in one of their data spotlights that most of the fraud complaints that they get, probably, close to 90%, if I had to pick a number out of the air, start on social media. What can the social media platforms be doing? When we look at new investors who are coming into the markets, most of them are younger, but they could be older folks as well. And I was talking to my friend from Finner the other day, and so that's where I got this information. But they're coming in and they're taking on much more risk than people who are more experienced. And where are they getting their information from? Most of them are getting it from YouTube, okay, Facebook, Instagram. So we need to be out there flooding the airwaves just like all these other folks are, and telling them, these are the warning signs, these are the things you need to be, looking out for, and we need to be looking out for each other.
And there's a fireside chat coming up that you will talk more about risk and some of the tools out there for folks. So, but thank you for the work that you're leading. I know you're tough on the industry, but you definitely, the goal is actually to make sure people have the resources so that they can navigate the space safely. Now, Chloe, you talked a bit about the great work that Robinhood is doing within your community to educate folks, but you recently launched a new program to help incentivize ongoing learning. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in an effort to continue to meet consumers where they are in our app specifically, Robinhood recently noticed that millions of individuals have gotten involved with crypto for the first time on our platform. And so through some user research that our internal team conducted, we found that many of them are struggling to find the information they need to learn more about cryptocurrency. And because of that, we launched this program called Robinhood Learn and Earn, where in our app, we have created educational modules where our customers go through these modules, learn about specific cryptocurrencies, and then take a short quiz, which they're then rewarded for. So currently we have a Learn and Earn module around Avalanche. So once our customers complete those modules around the Avalanche cryptocurrency, they then take a short quiz and receive $1 worth of AVAX. And we're actually really excited to be working with Circle to launch some educational modules around USD coin. So in coming weeks, you'll actually see that come live in our app. So we're really excited to be expanding the suite of educational modules that we have, again, to just find another layer as to how we can bring education to our customers and encourage them to learn about what they're putting their money into.
That's one of the things I've loved. I've seen the industry really collaborate across companies to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the industry. Now, Ashley, you talked about corporate responsibility, right? And why that was, really at the core of Circle Impact. But you have a challenge, right? Most people have heard of Bitcoin, right? And think they understand Bitcoin. But most people don't understand stable coins, what that is. So how do you navigate that where, this conversation about digital assets when there's so many types of digital assets and, stable coins are a complex piece to explain, especially with Circle's USDC being the I always like to say the most highest performing
We'll take that
stable
too.
coin.
I think actually we take that as a compliment. We want to be the most boring part of crypto, right? As boring as cash. And so, with that, I think there's been a lot of attention focused on coins in cryptocurrencies. And so we go by a moniker that, blockchain technology is so much bigger than cryptocurrency. There is using blockchain technology for the ability to file documents and record keeping, using blockchain technology for what we do, which is payments, right? But the payments infrastructure has not been evolved in the last, 20 to 30 years. And now you can use blockchain to do cross-border remittances or to pay and settle within a day. So I think for us, we have a number of different partners that we're working with to go outside of just consumer groups, because I do want to be honest that Circle is a B2B company, right? So we work with businesses who want to utilize blockchain and cryptocurrencies for their treasury capabilities or for their payment and settlements and remittances. So we have great partners like MoneyGram, Visa, MasterCard, and so on and so forth. But really what we're trying to do now is work with business owners and let them know that how blockchain technology can transform their businesses as well, right? Again, we are another option. And I think there is great opportunity to work with different government regulators like the CFTC and the Fed and the OCC and, all of the alphabet soups within the US government to make sure that there is proper disclosure on that outset, right? I think that's even what we saw during the whole mortgage fraud era, within financial services. There wasn't enough disclosures at the outset of what things are, how do they function, what will happen over time. And so, we really put it upon ourselves that there is a lot of effort, and as Chloe mentioned, even with Robinhood, to inform consumers, but now it's really showing utility value outside of trading and investing. And so we are happy to be boring, because boring can be a safe place sometimes, but we also want to, again, inform about risk in the totality of circumstances. So that's where we are right now moving forward in 2023.
If I could, just real quick. So we were talking a lot about financial literacy and financial education, and one thing that I do want to point out around risk is that when we look back at all the studies that have been done around financial literacy, it's usually measured around 4 or so different domains, right? Interest rates, understanding inflation, understanding risk, and understanding markets, essentially. When we look, historically and even today, the literacy rates are very low. The lowest among those domains is risk education. Okay, people generally don't understand risk, and when we're talking about, dealing with cryptocurrencies, and you mentioned a lot of the different risks that we have to educate around, there are a lot of new risks that need to be brought into the financial education sphere, including operational risk, hacking risk, fraud risk, which is a big one, which is has been around for quite some time, and we do quite a lot of education around that. But there's the hacking risk, the run risk that you don't have with regulated banking institutions, thanks to the FDIC. So there's a lot of new things that we need to bring into the curriculum.
And that's an excellent point, because right now, I used to say we have 4 generations dominating the marketplace. It's actually 5, because people under 13 are Generation Alpha. So, and under 13 people have a lot of disposable income somehow. But when you look at it intergenerationally, it would be one thing if you had a generation like boomers, they were no longer participating in the marketplace, or the youngest generation was not. But when you have across 5 generations, Zoomers, Gen Z, boomers, and Generation Alpha participating and engaging, the risks look differently for each of these consumer groups, right? So, but I do think we agree that the first line of defense to mitigate risk is education, right? Financial literacy is that first line of defense. I will say that when you compare where we are at right now, contemplating what is the regulatory framework for cryptocurrency, what does a digital assets economy looks like, right? We are having some tough conversations at the starting line. But when you look at the internet, right, which was supposed to decentralize us, in the 1990s, when Washington debated the policy around there, we didn't talk about financial inclusion. We didn't talk about accessibility. We didn't talk about literacy. And today we have not just a digital divide, a digital literacy gap as well. So we have, at this point, to actually make sure that we're having a different conversation about what policy should look like for the innovation economy driven by digital assets. So I would love your thoughts in terms of, what should be top of mind? And this is not, just for Congress or regulators, right? This is for all of us, right? Industry, advocacy groups, right? How do we approach this differently? Because again, the internet was supposed to decentralize us. We can agree it has not. And how do we make sure we can fulfill some of the promises here? So, Chloe, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. I think conversations like these are incredibly important, just because I think cryptocurrency is an innovative new asset class that has the power to drive inclusion in capital markets. And I think in order to do that, we must start normalizing conversations like these and shine a light on credible, safe educational resources to sort of clear out the noise that we may be seeing on social media or through potential fraud attempts to educate consumers on the fact that this asset class is an option that's available to them if they choose to pursue it.
Ashley?
I think being very mindful that we are picking venues, like I always use the phrase, blockchain on your block, right? Like, how do we create rooms that are reflective of what we see here? I know the audience might not be able to see, the virtual audience might not be able to see the audience, but generally when we have these talks, and we've been on panels for a couple of times, the audience is not comprised of this demographic makeup. And I think really what all of us are trying to communicate is balancing the scale between access and risk education. Because what I do not want us to do is live in a world where we are so afraid of risk that we prevent access. And we know wealth building, financial planning is all just being able to have the opportunity to participate. However, we need to recognize that there is an education disparity. This whole panel or symposium is by is on financial literacy and being able to analyze risk in your diversified portfolio. But I think moving forward, it's making sure that we do not abstain on access in fear of risk. And so just being mindful of how to balance that scale, which is a hard job to do.
And then before you go, I will say on that point, Ashley, right? You cannot build wealth without taking risks. Because if you don't take risks, you just go to your 9-to-5 job, right? So if we want wealth creation, risk is part of that, right? But we want people to take pragmatic risks, right? We want people to have the tools to be able to assess their risk appetite. And bear markets are part of being an investor, right? So if risk is part of wealth building and bear markets are part of that, we need to prepare people for these things and lean into these conversations that were often seen as, counterproductive when you're thinking about return on investment. I would argue that today's consumer thinks about these things as they actually make choices. Now, going back to our question, Dan, I know for you, in your role, not just at the CFTC, but even FLEC, you are thinking about this, right? How do we get this better than we did last time, right? And I go to the internet, but we've had other milestones where we've gotten it wrong as well. So what should we be thinking about?
Start by listening. And to Ashley's point, I mean, different audiences have different intrinsic motivations, right? And so if you're into Web3 and you're really curious about crypto, what's a Web3 application that could be built to educate about potential risks, right? If I'm an older American who, I have trouble turning my smartphone on, how do you reach those older Americans and talk to them about fraud and how they might be victimized and exposed to potential risks, right? In terms of fraud. If you're a Gen Xer like me, I'm pretty tech savvy. Like I said, I've been doing this for 25 years now. How am I going to be reached, right? And what's the best way to reach me? We've been saying that, financial literacy's been around for a long time, but it's not that old. Think about mathematics. How many people can solve a quadratic equation? And algebra's been around a lot longer than financial education, okay? So how do we use the existing infrastructures that we already have, community organizations. I mentioned libraries. I mentioned, I've talked to financial counselors who work with service members and their families. So, there's a lot of infrastructure there already. I think the trick is, how do you play that jujitsu when someone comes to you and says, I'm interested in, buying some Bitcoin? Okay, well, let's take that interest and say, well, what do you know about Bitcoin? Find out. Because if they can't tell you the fundamentals of how this works, maybe that's a place to start. Plus, go back and say, well, have you thought, do you have high interest credit cards? Do you have a savings account? Do you have a retirement account? Well, if you put all your money in Bitcoin, what happens if it drops 70% this year? Is your kid going to be able to go to college? Yeah, maybe not. So think about, again, how much can you afford to lose? Right? How much, if you have an overall, financial plan for your life, maybe you have some room to speculate with. Maybe you don't. But that's something that needs to be considered. So don't throw away all the work that's been done over the past generations. Utilize it. But utilize it in a way that's going to be attractive to students. And I'll tell you, this personal story, if we have time. I raised my kids with financial literacy, okay? When my kids were little, I would hand them their allowance and say, how much do you want to put in your savings account, right? So when my daughter, my youngest, got to high school and had to take a financial literacy course in Virginia, she came home with really bad grades. And I'm like, what's going on here? This is my business. This is what I live for. She goes, Dad, I already know all this stuff. It's not interesting. And so if you want to capture students, be interesting.
Excellent point. And Molly went to Virginia. She did well on her courses too, as she mentioned during the panel.
Pass, by the way. So, she did well. I'm very proud.
Yes, but I do think that Kristen Smith earlier, she made the point as well in terms of the typing. Like typing is great when you actually have to do it to type for your friends. How do we make it interesting? I want to open up for questions. I do want the panel to share best practices or thoughts they have to share with the audience. But any questions for our panelists?
What do you think, in particular, Ashley, if you care to comment on this, is the biggest hurdle right now to getting stablecoin legislation passed in this Congress? I know that's a fraught with many potholes.
Who paid you? So I say, right, we are an industry that is just burgeoning, right? And so many industries, even if you think about what happened in 2008, you view that as bad apples in the bunch. But we are still in a place where many view crypto, and if there's implosions by bad actors, fruit from the poisonous vine. And so I think the industry as a whole, and where Circle stands, is making sure that we reassure legislators that this is a natural progression of industries, right? Even if you think about the dot-com boom, had many different companies that happened, startups that happened, and some were successful and some were not. I think another part of it too is education. I know everybody hates that. That's a buzzword for the industry, but continuing to educate those within government of the utility value of stablecoins. I think stablecoins are in a very unique place, being that it's a backbone of the crypto asset and digital asset industry. You know, it's programmable money. It is the closest thing that we can get with digitizing the dollar. So I think there is a global competitiveness angle to where starting with stablecoins makes sense from a legislative perspective. I think there is a digital asset utility value. There's payments, there's humanitarian aid, cross-border remittances. We just did a paper by my colleague Gordon Lau with a number of other researchers about the cost savings in FX conversions, right? So using Uniswap to swap USD coin for Euro coin, and what a consumer stands to do or gain in cost savings, in not only in fees, but time. I think sometimes we very much don't value time and the latency that happens with traditional financial systems, where when you need to get money from point A to point B, that time has a value. So for us, I feel good, right? There's been bipartisan support of stablecoin legislation. Senator Toomey offered stablecoin legislation right before he retired. Chairman McHenry has talked about stablecoin legislation. You have great junior congressmen like Representative Richie Torres that's very excited about this space. Senator Booker, and Senator Gillibrand, so many. Who are talking about stablecoins in particular as the first step. So I feel good about it for the 118th Congress. So hopefully, fingers crossed, my prediction is correct. But I think stablecoins are the first logical step in taking a bite out of the apple. And honestly, if we think about global competitiveness, you have MiCA in Europe. Japan is just doing legislation on stablecoins, Singapore. So we need to make sure that the U.S. does not fall behind, one, in understanding that this space is going to continue to grow, and two, continuing our global financial system, because what you don't want is a patchwork global financial system. You want to make sure that the United States is a part of that harmonization of how we treat financial markets and infrastructure.
Last question.
Thank you all for your insights today. Just hearing from the three of you all are working on financial education when it comes to educating people, students. But I just wanted to know, how do we approach standard, so that everybody is kind of teaching the same thing? I know, Dan, you had mentioned earlier that, some people call cryptocurrency or digital assets or tokens or coins. How can we ensure that, be it industry educating or nonprofits educating or federal government educating, that we're all, communicating those same topics and subjects and teaching them in the same way so that everybody can understand, no matter where they're, no matter wherever they are around the country. Thank you.
I can start with that. So, being a federal agency, I'm going to defer to all of the great NGOs that are out there already. The Council for Economic Education and the Jumpstart Coalition already have a national standard financial literacy package that's out there. I think it may be, communicating with them to say, hey, these are things that we would like to see added. Again, not necessarily the role for the federal government, but, definitely something that industry and other nonprofit organizations should get involved with.
And do anyone want to?
And I know you're working on this personally.
Well, I know we have to wrap up. I will say that along the lines of the question for the Blockchain Foundation, one of the ambitious projects we've taken on is to create the first one-stop shop for education for the industry. It would be a digital assets public library. We've reached out to the American Library Association to get librarians to be part of what does that look like, and we're not going to create content. We're going to ask the industry, government, academia to share content that's already created, but having a digital library. So, because right now, let's be honest, the only place where the one-stop shop is YouTube, right? And there are good stuff on YouTube, but good luck finding it. So I do think that the barrier to where you're getting, right? How do we standardize education about crypto? It's the barrier is education, right? Because there's a lack of education that we need to break through. But I think that the barrier to policy as well is education. That is why, sorry for those of you who have ambitions, we're a decade out from any real legislation passing out of both chambers of Congress and signed by the president, whoever the president is at the time, right? And it is because of education. We underestimate that, policymakers love to debate, and just so you know, proposing legislation is part of just the process. But most bills are not intended to actually pass or advance. And until we actually educate folks, we're not going to really move policy. But the whole debate is important, right? The whole introducing, because that's how we figure out what works. And I think the point that Dan made in terms of some of these organizations that I've been working on financial literacy, they have standardized curriculum and training, and they provide certificates as well that people have to get to even be able to do some of that. So yes, and Mali has identified quite a bit of them in the paper, so we plan as a foundation to engage them as well. On that note, I would love to thank our panelists. I know we didn't get to the best practices question, but I think a lot of you shared that within your remarks, and I think it's, communicate, engage, and connect with communities. So thank you. And please queue up the next presentation, because the next is a keynote from one of our 1 billion speakers who actually came from the CFPB. So thank you very much, panelists. We appreciate it. So I want to bring up Delicia Hand from Consumer Reports. As I mentioned, she previously worked at CFPB, and she's been thinking about these issues. She has launched a new initiative at Consumer Reports, and they have a new framework that I'm not sure if they announced yet, but she'll be able to tell you a bit more about her background, the work that they're doing on Consumer Reports. I'm excited about Delicia's keynote because it goes back to this whole thing of leaning in on this conversation about financial literacy and risk, especially when it comes to product development. So, Delicia.
So good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? It's better now? All right. Let me actually move this. All right, so what I wanted to do today is just share with you some of the work that we are doing at Consumer Reports to really examine and answer the question around fintech and whether fintech is actually advancing the interests and the outcomes for consumers. High level, there are three themes that I want to focus on. We've got new products, services, asset classes, and our view is that these require a new paradigm and approach to education, some of which you've heard in the comments of various panelists today. And in the work that we're doing at Consumer Reports, we are trying to take an empirical approach to evolve what people know Consumer Reports for, which is product ratings and evaluations. So we're the folks that you go to, particularly in the last pandemic, when folks are at home shopping, to compare products. Should you buy this washing machine versus another? How do different kinds of home appliances, other kinds of appliances rate? So we are evolving that framework to apply to digital products and services. And then we hope to use this work to help consumers make better choices. We also hope to facilitate what we call a race to the top amongst industry, which is we can identify best practices, approaches that work, approaches in the technology that are better or consumers have better experiences with. And to this last panel's point, which is ensuring products are safe. And safe doesn't mean the traditional paternalistic approach of some of us in the advocacy movement, which is total risk avoidance, right? But risk education, that to be involved in finance and to get on the path towards creating wealth for yourself and the community, you have to be educated about those products and the risks that it entails. But want to tell a couple of stories. So I spent the last 10 years at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in a number of different capacities. But right before I left, one of the things that we were starting to organize is consumer experience research and really looking to ensure that the Bureau's policy work also reflected the experiences of consumers in the marketplace as they were interacting with these products. So for years, this information via our various policy offices at the CFPB was really used to focus on developing consumer education tools and consumer education materials. And as I was leaving, thinking about the next chapter, I realized we could actually use this work to shape our policy making, to really not just look at marketplace experience and marketplace data, but how is the consumer actually doing with respect to these emerging products in the marketplace before we think about the policy agenda. And some of that perspective is what brings me, is what I'm doing at Consumer Reports. But I note that because while at the CFPB, we received numerous accolades for our financial education, as my former colleague Dan Rutherford was part of in the early years at the CFPB. We received accolades for our literacy levels, use of plain language, use of dynamic tools. And at the same time, we never made that next leap to think about this new emerging class of assets as well as fintech products. We stopped short. So to me, it was a missed opportunity to really engage with new fintech products and see what consumers were experiencing in the marketplace. So at CR, one of the things that we are doing is we have a fair digital finance program, and last week we launched this program officially with a framework for evaluating digital products. This evaluation framework consists of a series of principles and norms for utilizing digital products. So one half of the framework tethers to regulatory standards, so privacy, safety, transparency. The other half looks at consumer outcomes. So to the extent that consumers are engaging with these products, how are they doing? We've heard from others, you all probably know better than I, that fintech really made inroads in financial services by facilitating access, by advocating and developing different ways of accessing various consumer segments, but really messaging heavily on inclusion. So is that actually true? Has fintech actually facilitated safe access? Is it changing outcomes for consumers? So we have the outcome side of our framework, which focuses on inclusivity, user-centeredness. So how is the user of various products, what is that experience like? And that could explore different things such as the customer service aspect of the user's interaction with the product or service. It can also look at the app setup. So what steps has a company taken to really integrate and facilitate consumer engagement with the application. And you can see how that might tie back to financial literacy. The approach in this space and the consumer protection side has largely been to ask companies to develop tons of disclosures, and the research shows that consumers don't engage with those disclosures. They try to get through them as quickly as possible to get to the specific thing that they want. So is fintech doing anything different with respect to these obligations? We're also looking at financial well-being. So what happens during and after a consumer uses various products? How do they feel about their own financial health and other financial well-being considerations? And then on the most emerging edge of our principle set is environmental and social governance. There's a lot of research pointing to the fact that younger consumers want to consume with a conscience. They are very interested in the ways in which their spending is affecting not just their own outcomes, but the outcomes of their fellow citizens, the environment, and also diversity, how we interact with each other, what are inclusive practices, are companies actually inclusive, or are they just interested in being part of a community and engaging with consumers and making more profits? So we released our framework last week, and over the next several months, we will be putting out, and we did this as well last week, limited applications of the framework to engage in a conversation with the broader ecosystem about our learnings as well as opportunities to improve our underlying product, which is our evaluation and testing framework. The framework encompasses various methodologies. So we go from the principle to specific criteria of safety, privacy, transparency, inclusivity, et cetera. And then from criteria to specific indicators, actions or behaviors that we want to observe in the consumer's use of a product, in the actual mobile app itself, to demonstrate those specific criteria. And then we collect information and data and synthesize those findings. So we did that with peer-to-peer apps. Next, this spring, we will be releasing an evaluation of some short-term digital lending products, buy now, pay later. Specifically, we will also be looking at mobile banking apps. So how are the largest bank apps comparing to some of the newer digital-only thinks and what's that consumer engagement experience like. I often lament that we didn't do this a year earlier and do what we're planning to do at the end of the year, which is also do some evaluation and testing of crypto exchanges. What would the world have looked like if we had clear, independent ratings of the different exchanges and wallets that are out there? And alongside that, some as other folks have talked to, some clear nomenclature, definitions, to really situate consumers with respect to the different kinds of asset classes, but also the different kinds of transactions. And again, how do they impact their specific experience with that product? Apologies. So in terms of our results, so I've largely skipped by some of these slides, but what's the end point? The end goal of this initiative is that we want to make finance fair, specifically digitized finance. We want to ensure that consumers can spend, save, borrow, and invest safely, privately, without discrimination or predation, and improve their financial outcomes. And we think that the very products themselves and the characteristics, particularly in the digital finance space, ought to truly embody that. So we're embarking on an examination of various products and services. And particularly for consumers of color and women, this is precisely because, as others have mentioned, there's a whole array of alphabet soup of different regulations and laws that have been developed that have not actually changed outcomes for consumers. There still remain credit deserts. Wealth creation is still something that is very much on the list for communities all across the country. We haven't actually tried to achieve that. And I strongly believe that part of that has been the approach with respect to risk. It's been risk avoidance as opposed to risk education, really examining the actual outcomes. So we hope with our work to actually, as I mentioned, we've got 3 prongs. So we want to democratize, right? We are going to evaluate. We have begun to evaluate. We're going to share the information back. We're also not just going to put it up on websites because, as we heard at the end of last week, TikTok has surpassed Google, Facebook, as the lead web domain that consumers go to. Consumers, it seems, would rather watch a video, watch somebody engage with a product, actually see the experience happening for themselves. So we're thinking about ways in which to infuse the results of this work and democratize information sharing. We also hope that we can help companies truly differentiate. We want to see good products out there. We want to move from crypto fintech skepticism into actual differentiated standards. So what are the best practices that we're seeing? After consumers interact with certain products, what are the specific outcomes? And the best products should win, and consumers should know what the best products are. And we want to disrupt. So we're not just thinking about putting information out there, but we expect to learn some things. And we ourselves as an organization are thinking about technology integrated solutions. So more on that, but think about, the equivalent of different kinds of service research products that are out there helping consumers to make decisions. But our view is that if consumers use Google or other kinds of features to lead them to different places around the world, what can lead them around the web and what can direct consumers to better products? So we've done some research, and I just kind of want to, for any of you that's interested in taking a look at our framework as well as our recent evaluation of peer-to-peer apps. you can use that QR code to access the report. So what did we find? So on balance, we looked at 4 of the leading peer-to-peer payments apps that are out there, Apple Cash, Cash App, Venmo, and Zelle. And we found all of them good enough to use, right? But the major finding that stands out, and you see here some figures around usage. So these are the places where we're going to be examining based on consumer usage. We started with payments apps because that's where we actually had an initial study in 2018. And so we went back to that and we said, well, how has the world changed? In 2018, roughly 79 million consumers reported that they were using peer-to-peer apps, and we found in 2022 that has doubled. No surprise, given that we've all just come through this pandemic. We know that more consumers are online and more consumers are using fintech applications. So we are going to take our own risk-based approach and start with the places where consumers are largely. But we found some concerns around use of financial information, which also aligned with consumer experiences. So consumers are using these apps, but they're using so with some caution and sense of, ooh, I'm not quite sure what's being used, how my information's being used, with whom it's shared. Is it adequately secure, is what some of our survey research revealed. And then largely our findings fell into 3 categories. There were other findings, but these are the ones where we are now developing tips for consumers. So one, in the P2P payment space, not all companies are going to reimburse for all kinds of fraud, specifically with respect to what we call fraud in the inducement. This is the smishing text scams that you might have all received. You get a text from USPS. It says, and who's not expecting a package these days? And the text says, you know, you need to send some additional funds, and the URL starts with USPS, right? So you're like, oh, I've got a package, got to get it, or you got to make sure I have enough postage. You click, you don't even think about it. You begin a payment transaction. The consumer is actually authorized that payment, and the law makes a distinction between authorized payments and unauthorized payments, such that if you click, whether you realize that this was a scam or not, you're on the hook for most of the for these transactions. All the companies we evaluated won't reimburse you for that. They may investigate because that is their obligation, but most consumers are on the hook for the liability that comes with that. We found that companies collect and share large amounts of consumer data. That's not so disturbing in and of itself, right? We are in financial services. There are many licensing and other obligations that come with the collection of data for the provision of the service. But what happens with that data? With whom is it shared? For what different kinds of purposes? And is that transparently manifested? And how much control do consumers have over that data? Can they continue to use the service and delete that data incrementally over time? If you're primarily using the app, can you do that through your mobile app, or do you have to go online somewhere and download some heavy files? So these are some of the considerations and things that we looked at. Lastly, and most important, Cleb talked about it's a curriculum stupid. We say it's a disclosure stupid, partly because consumers don't read them, right? We found that there are some good practices. So we have seen where companies are moving from just checking the box, but the vast majority of practices that we're seeing is companies still checking the box, right? So some good things that we saw were companies moving from just throwing a bunch of fine print or giving you links to their website to more fine print to actual interface pages, slowing down the onboarding process so consumers have a meaningful opportunity to engage with topics around how is their information managed and kept. If you are using an app that's within a larger ecosystem of apps, how do they communicate with each other? Does your use of this financial app open you to marketing and all other kinds of practices? What is the consent process for management of this information? Are the apps using the latest security measures? Can you as a consumer do anything within the app to make your experience safer, more private, et cetera? What we found is here especially, companies could do more to actually signpost to consumers and use more integrated and interactive features, so gaming-like features and other kinds of technology integrated measures to actually get consumers to engage. For the most part, for these apps that allow you to instantaneously send money or receive money, it's just not up to par with the nature of the technology. We should be doing more than sending consumers to a website with 3.5 point font. And so here is a place where we found a number of opportunities for improvement. So what? In doing this work, after we did the evaluations, we met with the companies. Our primary model and purpose for doing this is we want to see better products out there. We will begin rating these products and putting this information out into the marketplace. And so we are working with the companies to identify better practices and make recommendations. And even in this beta initiative, which we launched last week, some of the companies we evaluated agreed that they could do better and are working to make improvements. And lastly, I would say, just in terms of methodology, we started this first study was primarily documentation review. We look at policies and practices of the various companies. And in our next series of evaluation, our approach is going to be to build. So we did some consumer surveys and documentation review. Why? We think about it like documentation is kind of like the check engine light on your car when it goes off. You get a car, you get a user manual, you never look at it until some light on your dashboard goes off. You get a flat tire, and then you spend probably half an hour looking for a user manual or going online trying to figure out, okay, what do all these things mean? So documentation still serves an important place. And as I mentioned, it is the primary regulatory vehicle right now or obligation for companies when you talk about management of consumer information, safety, and transparency. So we thought it was important to put ourselves in the position of a consumer. So what happens when you accidentally type in someone's email and you send it to the wrong person? What are the policies around these procedures? What happens when you respond to a smishing scam or other kinds of errors or situations that you can find yourself in? You go to the FAQs, the user manual, et cetera. So for this stage, we thought it was really important to test the documentation and companies' practices around that, but we will build on that. So our methodologies include user experience, research, where we're actually prompting users to do certain things within the apps, making observations about what insights users draw from engaging with the apps, as well as network flow and data flow analysis ourselves. And then active consumer engagement. So we've organized focus groups and consumer boards. These are sort of online focus groups to engage with consumers around various products. And we hope that we make a difference, that we help to facilitate a race to the top and identify some best practices. And to the point of this whole conversation, we also hope that we educate consumers, that consumers walk away feeling like they have better information about the products, which products will actually help them save better, which products actually gets them onto the path to financial security. Why? Because if you look at a number of fintech organizations, they have embraced what advocates have failed to achieve in the law for decades now. They have embraced the banner and the messaging around financial inclusion. There are a number of companies that are talking about all of these things that they will achieve for consumers, and so we want to examine the marketplace and say, okay, well, here are the best practices. Here are some of the things that we're seeing that actually put consumers in control of their own finances. So with that, I will pause for any questions. Hi.
I want to open. Am I good? Okay. I want to open by saying thank you so much. The consumer disclosure and how those truly affect us, because we've all agreed to things that we haven't read or we haven't understood. But what is Consumer Report's stance on manufactured consent, where in the failure to agree to these terms, we find ourselves in a position where we might be in non-compliance with other regulatory environments, et cetera?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I would say we have a stance per se, but we want meaningful consent and meaningful disclosures, right? So we want to see companies taking actions within their app environments to actually facilitate meaningful engagement such that the consumer just isn't clicking through. Maybe not on everything, right? Finance is complicated and there are a lot of boxes to check along the way. And so there are some things that may not necessarily make that much difference in terms of the user experience and the consumer's exposure to risk. But then there are some places and spaces where it's going to be extremely important, and I think that's where we're going to be focusing on.
Hi. Thank you for this information and for taking this analysis underhand. The question is, so I see where these reports will come in very handy for consumers. Do you also plan to publish or make sort of accessible to consumers what the framework is absent the actual analysis? So for instance, so these are the 5 things you would most care about when you're evaluating on your own kind of information.
So I'll say a couple of things. So with our release last week, we actually have published the framework, and it's hard to take the regulator hat off. So I've taken an RFI approach to this initiative in that we're publishing it because we want feedback on it. We want to improve it. We want to also make sure that it's relevant to all parts of the ecosystem, right? So we want feedback from companies that we will evaluate. We also want feedback from consumers. We have at Consumer Reports a community research program. So with the launch last week, where we published the framework alongside our research, we also engaged consumers online to say, well, what do you think is most important, right? And here we have certain metrics for financial well-being, for example, but what do you think we should examine, right? And we're going to use both sets of inputs. We'll probably have multiple inputs. We're also talking with regulators. There are lots of things on my own mental to-do list, having spent 10 years at consumer finance protection regulator, that I saw missed opportunities because of limitations of our authorities that potentially another organization sitting in a different position could do. So we're also in conversation with all of the financial protection regulators to also get their feedback about how this initiative can be helpful.
Well, thank you, Delicia. As you can tell, this research is so important. We plan to ask Delicia to come back for our April 11th event and go deeper into this research as well. So Delicia and I spoke at Money 2020 last October, and we talked about this whole Has FinTech Fulfilled Its Promise. So it's so wonderful to see this initiative and framework she talked about come up live. So congratulations, but much, 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 much needed. And I think this is a resource I think the crypto industry will look to as well. So we have 2 more sessions left. But, our next speaker is Kevin Griffin. He is with the Office of Congressman Andre Carson. He is going to talk about the Young Americans Financial Literacy Act. So obviously, our paper focuses on financial literacy at the K-12 level, and we definitely think mayors and governors should lead the way. But we know Congress has been talking about this, and Kevin is going to give us background on this legislation specifically because it is unique and interesting in a lot of different ways. So Kevin, thank you for the work you're doing, but also the work that the congressman is doing in this issue as well.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so excited to be with all you guys today. Your beautiful faces, this warm, welcoming environment, this beautiful space has been incredible to hear some of you guys' stories and where you guys come from. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I only had one financial literacy course when I was in high school, and it was horrible. It was a group of slides with a PowerPoint and a couple of maybe calculator applications tied to the program. I graduated in 2014 from high school. I think the course may have been something from 2005, right? So it wasn't engaging to high schoolers. And I don't feel like I learned a lot afterwards. You could speed through the course as fast as you wanted to. There was no engagement. So it's full circle to kind of work now for the congressman from Indianapolis, where I'm from, and also hear your story about working for the CFPB, which I'll talk a little bit about as well, and our partnership, hopefully for the future if this bill passes. So I'm here to talk about the Young Americans Financial Literacy Act of 2023. We've reintroduced this bill several times in the past, but it's a no-brainer, I think, for Congress to endorse, to support, to engage in conversation about financial literacy. Republicans or Democrats or independents. Like I said, I was lucky enough even to have a financial literacy course, but it didn't suffice enough for me as someone who is a Hill staffer and doesn't make a lot of money. Oh, the microphone, yes, thank you. Who doesn't make a lot of money, and so it's important for me to be a good steward of my money, no matter if I make lots of money or have humble beginnings when it comes to pay. But the Financial Literacy Act, the Young Americans Financial Literacy Act, is aimed at making sure that 8-year-olds to 24-year-olds have access to financial literacy courses, also have access to things such as apps. The goal of the bill is to create a partnership with the CFPB to make sure that grant programs exist in communities across the country to invest in communities. So we could be working with companies like Chase, we could be working with companies like Intuit, for example, and creating either apps, for example, or brick and mortar locations for financial literacy. supplementing education for teachers as well, and making sure that they have what they need. Because a lot of times it might be a social studies teacher who's teaching financial literacy, or maybe it's a sports coach who is supplementing his income, right? We want to make sure that not only are they trained up to be people that can help people be good stewards of their money, but also make sure that it's time-tested, research-driven, and scientific-based information that we're giving people to be good stewards of their money. And so this bill creates partnerships with higher education, local educational agencies, nonprofit organizations as well, to make sure that no matter what, we can give young people the education they need when it comes to financial literacy. At this point in time, we have lots of co-sponsors, from Barbara Lee, for example, Frederica Wilson in Congress, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, the Congresswoman here, Representative Watson Coleman. And we've built a lot of co-sponsors this month, but we need that extra push. And so that's why I wanted to speak with you all today, because I won't bore you guys with the statistics about how financial education and literacy is at an all-time low, and how in some ways they're getting better for states to make sure that young people are educated, but to make sure that we create a call to action and making sure that not only are we talking to our representatives, we're also talking to our state representatives, right? Our senators, our mayors, our governors. I worked on Senator Paul Strauss's office here in DC, or in his office rather. And one of the things that we tried to do was make sure that we fought for statehood rights, right? But one of the ways in which we did that is by making sure that we talked to local leaders to then have an impact by talking to other leaders above and beyond their calling, right, when it comes to your senators and your U.S. representatives. And so that's what we're calling on you guys to do now, is to make sure that if you have relationships with senators or representatives, that we collaborate and make sure that we can push this bill through the House of Representatives and eventually, hopefully, through the Senate and get it to the president. Not only is this a program that we believe that will have great success for young people, but we also understand that this will teach their parents as well how to manage their money. It'll create generational wealth for people as well. It will create education when it comes to scams, like we talked about before, making sure that not only is it about managing your money, but also managing risk as well, and understanding risks that exist in the marketplace right now, the stock market, understanding how to invest in a 401k, making sure you understand what a pay stub is and how to file your taxes every year, right? So I think the beautiful thing about this is it's a grant program that has so many avenues and creative ways that can be used to build up educational platforms. So I'll keep it short for you guys, but I think that this is an awesome bill that the congressman has reintroduced several times, and we are hoping that we can get it through the finish line this year. We have a lot of motivation from the Congressional Black Caucus. We have a lot of people that are interested in the Congressional Progressive Caucus that have also co-signed on to this bill as well. We're making sure that we reach out to the New Dems, for example, making sure that we reach out to the Heartland Caucus, which exists for the first time this year, and represents states that are in the Midwest, and making sure that they know that this bill exists, and we're trying to get those representatives on as well. Last year, we had Senator Klobuchar be the co-lead in the Senate. I worked for Senator Klobuchar before working for Congressman Carson as a staff assistant, and I know her passion for financial literacy and consumer protection. Working on the Commerce Committee, she does a lot of that work and making sure that people are paying for what they deserve when they sign on the dotted line or they put their credit card information in. So I'm open to any questions, but happy to connect with all of you guys afterwards, because I want this not just to be a conversation about what could be, but something that will be. I believe that in my lifetime, we'll see a bill like this pass. And it takes all our energy, right? I was an organizer, and I loved campaigning, knocking on doors, and having conversations with people. But it means not only making sure that our generation now is okay after a pandemic, after a lack of in-person education, making sure that not only do we train up this generation, but for generations to come. And I don't want another kid learning it through a program that may have not have benefited them, but I also want to make sure that they learn early on, because I oftentimes see some of my peers who have the privilege of having financial literacy education at a young age. And I know how that can make a big impact, whether it's buying a house at an early age or stopping rent payments, right, to then invest in property, or, to travel or do more things that, create a betterment of life for people as well. So happy to answer any questions and happy to be with all you guys today. Yes. Oh, you're good. Okay.
Thank you. It seems to be a no-brainer to get involved and support this bill.
Absolutely.
And I read it. It's research-based, and it reaches out to a lot of different constituencies. So what seems to be the problem?
Politics.
No, I mean besides the politics, but there must be something that we can cross so that it can have that final.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the biggest hurdle is not getting it into committee. We've had no problem introducing it. It's easy. I can write a bill today and have it introduced this evening, right? So that's not the issue. The issue really at this point is making sure that, frankly, that we can get conservatives on board with an organization like the CFPB. A lot of times, that is a holdup from stakeholders on the conservative side. We continue to have conversations with those that are on the other side, and we want to continue to gain their support. But that's the biggest hesitation, unfortunately. But that shouldn't stop us. We have I don't want to speak a lot about politics, but we have a small minority right now as a Democrat, as Congressman Carson is a Democrat. And if we can get, 8 different Republicans, then we can pass this bill in the House, and then it can go to the Senate. And I really do believe that we can get this done this Congress. We have other bipartisan bills that we are advocating for as well. But I think that if we can get all of our Democratic colleagues to get on the bill, then I think we can get some of our more moderate Democrats to have conversations with Republicans. And because of caucuses like the Heartland Caucus that exist for the first time this Congress, I think we'll be able to not only show leadership in the Democratic Party that we're serious about the Heartland, but also issues related to the Heartland. And a lot of that stuff is related to misuse of credit cards and, lack of financial literacy programs, as I talked about. And I think if we use that as a platform, I think we can definitely engage with more Republicans and ease some of their concerns about the CFPB and other organizations that they may have traditionally not supported. Yeah.
And Kevin, right, I'm sure our virtual audience, as well as people here, are just perplexed that there would be an issue with moving forward a financial literacy bill. Can you talk a little bit about the arc of financial literacy bills? How many bills have we actually passed? And then also, can you also talk about CFPB and this financial literacy mandate that they do have and how they exercise that?
Absolutely. So I personally can't speak for CFPB, but I will say that the programming is very encouraging. We just heard a speaker that talked about her work at the CFPB and the fantastic work that they're doing currently. I think that the CFPB is research driven. I think that we need organizations, we need agencies to not only support bills, but to also walk side by side with us and create programming that's going to benefit the next generation of young Americans. As far as the arc of financial literacy bills, I can definitely get back to people about how many financial literacy bills that we passed and how many have been introduced. But my short period of time, I haven't seen many. I haven't seen any actually at all, at least on the House side. And I think that it's not because people are lacking interest. There are a lot of people in Congress that want to see bills like this. But I think that when it comes to financial literacy, Congressman Carson of Indianapolis is leading the charge and making sure that he not only leaves his name as a mark on something like this, but he uses it as an opportunity to create more legislation so we have opportunities in the future for young people to achieve at their best.
Thank you. I'll make mine brief. Thank you so much for sharing about this piece of legislation.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask if you are active, if your member is active in the Financial Literacy Caucus, and if there are any plans in store for Financial Literacy Month, which is upcoming.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have tons of bills that we are introducing, and we love the fact that I love the fact that you mentioned Financial Literacy Month, because that's our whole goal. If I'm not mistaken, next month we want to introduce the bill next month and make sure that we not only, now that you said that, target the caucus and make sure that they know about this opportunity as well. And I can definitely look to see if he's on that caucus. Oftentimes, some of the caucuses will reorganize maybe a month or two into Congress. I know the Heartland Caucus met earlier in the month, and a couple other caucuses have asked Congressman Carson to sign on. But if he hasn't been in the past, I'll make sure he definitely is now, because I think that that would be a great group to strategically figure out how we can get this bill pushed through. So yes to making sure that we can get this bill introduced during Financial Literacy Month. And secondly, I will definitely have a conversation with the congressman, and I believe with my whole heart that he'd be willing to definitely join the caucus for that goal.
I think if the bill was to be passed, how is it envisioned to be marketed sort of around the country so that all the communities that could benefit would learn that, hey, this opportunity is out here for us to apply for?
Absolutely. So as many of you probably know already, there are financial institutions that do have brick and mortar locations across the country that are serving underserved populations. And what this bill would do was make sure that not only are those underserved populations served, but also to partner with a variety of institutions. So anywhere from Chase to Chase to Intuit to SoFi, for example, and making sure that people's information is protected, right? Making sure that these companies are not selling people's information and using it for marketing purposes, but having the biggest reach possible by having apps designed for classroom instruction or after-school programs, having brick-and-mortar locations, but also making sure that it's accessible and it's free for people to use. Also, the CFPB has done a great job of advertising its programs, but we think that we can work with them to do even better, to make sure that these programs are not only accessible, but are advertised properly. And so with the direction of the director of the CFPB or the administrator that would oversee this program in particular, having those conversations and making sure that we can get, especially under an administration that I think is supportive of these types of ideals, to make sure that underserved populations get what they deserve. But when we talk about underserved populations, I mean, that's a lot of different communities. I mean, that's not just people that are in poverty. That's not just people that are not getting financial literacy education currently. That's across the country, and I think everybody could have a boost or a supplemental education when it comes to this. So I think that you'll see a wide variety from private schools to public schools to other institutions that use this as a goal to educate the future. Thank you so much.
I thought it was important to actually have Kevin come and actually speak about this bill. We just talked about, in the earlier panel about in the 90s when we debated the internet, the conversations we didn't have, right? And so in order to get different results, we need policy making to actually focus on, these very concrete, substantive aspects of how we develop the industry, right? We spend a lot of time focused on legislation on stable coins or legislation to figure out are cryptos securities or commodities. But we need to spend just as much time focused on financial literacy and workforce training and risk education and making sure people are prepared for the jobs of the future. And so the foundation wants to be that entity that can actually lead those conversations. So our final conversation gets to the heart of how do consumers protect themselves from risk, right? What are some of the tools out there? And Janae Eo is going to come and moderate that conversation with Clark Fentbar from Chainalysis. I always say Chainalysis because of the accent, it's hard, but it's Chainalysis. And so the Chainalysis does a great job of working with law enforcement, but being a leading industry player in terms of making sure that, we can mitigate risk within this space. So please join us, ladies.
Well, thank you. I think it's off.
Thank you.
This one works, right?
Yes, yes. Hi, Clark.
Oh.
All right, so for some of you that may not know Clark, she is a senior policy advisor with Chainalysis, where she advises on legislative and regulatory developments related to cryptocurrency. Before Chainalysis, Clark worked as an intelligence analyst for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, focusing on transnational organized crime and darknet markets. And she also worked for the American Bar Association, where she managed international development projects in Latin America. So I know Clev spoke a little bit about Chainalysis and what you all do, but could you tell us a little bit more about your organization and your role, your company's role in mitigating risk in the digital asset space through education?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much to Clev and the Blockchain Foundation and you, Janae, for having me here today. It's such a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed the conversations. Like many people here today, I also didn't get any financial literacy courses. I think I learned how to write a check when I was in 4th grade. I did have to, in order to graduate high school and college, pass a swimming test. And I go swimming a handful of times a year, but I spend money daily. And I feel like the priorities weren't really in line.
I agree. I learned how to write a check in 6th grade, and I went to school in Virginia, so that was mandatory in elementary school. So I was shocked to see that has shifted from 6th grade all the way up to high school, where you're learning financial education.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get this bill passed and get some more financial literacy out there. But anyways, to your question, Chainalysis is a blockchain data company. We build compliance and investigation solutions. So what that means is that we take data from blockchain ledgers, cryptocurrency ledgers, and we make that digestible. So we build tools that compliance companies or compliance teams are using at financial institutions, at cryptocurrency exchanges to see are their customers receiving funds from illicit sources? Are they trying to send funds to illicit services? So for example, darknet marketplaces, harkening back to my past life. And then they can take their, depending on their risk-based approach, they can follow their own internal processes and see, what are they going to do with that information? Are they going to file a SAR? Are they going to freeze the account? But they have all of that information because the blockchain is transparent. And so you can trace those transactions. And then on the investigative side, we have a tool called Reactor, and that enables sorry.
I think it's broken.
Technical difficulty.
Technical difficulty. I think mine is also broken too.
Testing. All right, let's try that again. Is this working? Yes, okay. So we have the KYT, Know Your Transaction, which is the compliance tool, but then we have Reactor, which is an investigations tool. And so that's used by law enforcement to see, and compliance teams really, to see what is happening. They can trace transactions on the blockchain and see, you can't tell who the cryptocurrency belongs to, but you can see which services the transactions are flowing between. So for example, you can see that this address has sent funds to Coinbase, or that this address has received funds from a scam. And then based on that, if you're law enforcement, you can follow the funds to a cash out point where you might be able to subpoena them if they are a regulated entity. Or you might be able to build out a better picture of the ecosystem. For example, if it's a ransomware actor, it gives you a lot of insight into their whole network. You can see what other ransomware strains they might be affiliated with. You can see who they're paying. You can see, are they using this VPN provider that they're paying in crypto? Who are the affiliates? Who's getting what percentage of the proceeds, et cetera? And so that's really valuable information that you just really wouldn't have access to in traditional financial assets.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why I was drawn to crypto was the fact that it was so transparent. Everything is on the blockchain. And I just want to ask you, because, looking at this report that just came out, there's only one state in the country that has a cryptocurrency embedded into their financial literacy education, which is Georgia. And, as a parent, 60% of parents surveyed from the report, they want their children learning more about, cryptocurrency. With that in mind, how can we show to people that cryptocurrency is, something that we need to educate people about? How can we show that cryptocurrency is safe since everything is on the blockchain?
Absolutely. I think, there's risks to any type of investment, right? I think we've all seen over the past few months, I don't know about you, my stock portfolio is down. I bought a house at the top of the market. Its value is down. The money in my savings account is worth less than it was. There's risks to everything, right? But it's really about educating yourself and understanding what you're investing in and making sure you understand what that is. So taking advantage of all of the resources that people have talked about today, like the different government agencies that are publishing different guides and academies. Chainalysis has a free academy on our site, academy.chainalysis.gov, which has a lot of great videos that are really good resources if you're just starting to learn about cryptocurrency. A lot of the different cryptocurrency exchanges also have really good resources. So it's really about taking the time to learn about what you're investing in and not getting caught up in the hype, the FOMO, and rushing to invest in something that you don't understand.
And, just going back to what you mentioned about risks, I think, there is an amount of risk that we all, participate in if we're investing or purchasing even. And, speaking to cryptocurrency, what are some risks that, consumers and retail investors face in this space?
Yeah. So there's some of the risks are the same as in traditional finance, and some of them are unique to crypto. So one thing that is unique to crypto, for example, is that transactions are not reversible. So if you send money to an address, you can't reverse that the way that you could with a wire transaction, for example. So that's something that you have to be aware of. And as you are confirming the transactions, you have to make sure that you really want to send that. You have to think about how you're custodying your cryptocurrency. If you are self-custodying your cryptocurrency, you have to make sure that you feel comfortable with how you're doing that. If you're using a hardware wallet, for example, that you understand how that works, that you bought it from a reputable source. Don't buy your hardware wallets on eBay. Sometimes those are scams and they'll siphon your money off. That if you have a paper wallet that you are storing that safely, if you're using a brain wallet that you have a better memory than I do. I still haven't managed to memorize my husband's phone number. So brain wallets are out for me.
I had a quick question. Could you briefly go into an explanation of self-custody and
Sure.
what that means compared to exchange, keeping your money on an exchange?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-custodying cryptocurrency would be using a personal wallet like a MetaMask wallet, or a physical hardware wallet. Sometimes they, like a Trezor or a Ledger, they look like these little USB sticks, basically. And you can send the funds to this little hardware wallet, which is considered to be more secure in some instances than saving, for example, your seed phrase in the cloud, where somebody might hack the cloud and steal your seed phrase and then take your funds.
Thank you. So just going back to what you mentioned, how transactions are irreversible, you have to confirm, that the actual wallet before you're sending your funds. I know similarly to fintechs, if you use Venmo or Cash App and you're sending money to someone and you don't know that person, it'll prompt you. But like Delisha mentioned in her report earlier, we're in this society now where everyone just kind of wants to scroll through those terms and conditions. We're not really thinking twice about who we're sending money to or what we're allowing on our phones. With that in mind, what would you do if you're in a situation like that when you're sending money to someone? It could be a scam or not a scam, where you're sending money to someone and you send it and you're not thinking, but you realize you need that money back. You sent it to the wrong person, or that person's not sending the money back to you. What would you do?
Yeah, I think unfortunately there are a lot of scams out there like that, where it'll look like you're sending funds to a legitimate party, or you will, for example, click on a link that'll turn out to be a phishing link from an exchange's customer support line, similar to the USPS or UPS example that you gave. And it'll siphon off all of the funds from your account. And so it's very important to look carefully at these links and to really make sure that you trust the site, there's nothing funky in the URLs, that there's nothing suspicious. And you can go and verify, like, if you're getting something from Coinbase support, you can call them independently, like go to their real website, call them and see, like, was this really you, before you actually confirm anything. So there's ways that you can verify. But if you do fall prey to a scam, there's a number of things you can do. You can report to your local law enforcement. A lot of them are really improving their capacity to investigate cryptocurrency-related scams, especially if they're in larger metropolitan areas. You can report to your local FBI office, your local Secret Service office, Homeland Security Investigations Office. I would also report to IC3, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, ic3.gov. And I will actually report things to ic3.gov, even if I haven't fallen prey to that. But if I'm seeing scams, I report them to IC3 so that they're being cataloged, because what happens with those is they're put out to industry as TTP reports, as like different trend reports that are being witnessed in the industry to alert exchanges and financial institutions as to what scams are out there, so that information then gets broadcast more broadly.
So I'm really curious to know, tell me a little bit more about some of the scams that your organization is seeing, what you're seeing in your work. What is most prevalent out there, when it comes to cryptocurrency and scams?
I think, unfortunately, criminals are some of the most creative people out there. So there's a lot of different types of scams. So some of them have been mentioned earlier. Dan from CFTC mentioned romance scams. Those aren't new in finance in general. We see them, people move to whatever technology is new. And so we're seeing them in crypto now. Whereas maybe they would have started in the AOL chat rooms where Kristen learned how to type. That's also how I learned how to type. Now we see them on social media, on dating apps, where people will develop a relationship and then eventually ask for money in cryptocurrency. So romance scams continue. We see something called pig butchering now. And pig butchering is a term that comes from the Chinese term, and it sort of means to develop a relationship with somebody and fatten them up. I hate this term. We need to come up with a better term for this, before scamming them of money. And the way that these often start is that you'll get these sort of innocuous looking text messages that'll say hey, Carol, I'm running late. And I feel like we've all gotten these text messages. I get more and more of them all the time now. And you feel this urge to be like, oh no, Carol's going to be waiting for this person. I want to reply, but don't. Because Carol isn't real. And they are just trying to figure out, is your telephone number a live telephone number? Will you reply? And if you do, they will try to develop a relationship with you. And they'll do this over a really long period of time. And eventually they'll sort of drop into the conversation, oh, well, I've just made a lot of money. I invested in this great project. I'm really excited about it. They won't ask you for money initially. They'll drop hints about it over time. But eventually they'll sort of say, let me know if you want me to share a link. You might get $20 of credit on it. And it'll turn out to be a fake exchange or something like that. And for a while, you'll be able to deposit and withdraw funds. But once you put enough money on there, you won't be able to, and they'll have scammed you out of a lot of money. So that's a big one that we're seeing. And the particularly sad thing about this is that the people who are doing the scamming are often victims of human trafficking who are in these warehouses and are being forced to scam people out of their funds. So it's just sort of this awful from all angles situation. So that's another one. Another type of scam that we see is where people pretend to be the government, usually the IRS or social services, not social services.
Security?
Social security, thank
Social
you.
Security.
And they'll call you and say, you're in trouble, you owe us all kind of money, and you have to pay us back. And people panic. I don't know why they think the IRS is demanding money in crypto, but they panic, and people are afraid of being in trouble with the government, and they pay it. I used to actually get those calls all the time on my FBI issued phone, which was really funny. Anyways, I digress. I've got 12 others if you want me to go.
12 others? Well,
we can move on though.
Okay, we can. Okay. Let's, because I wanted to briefly pivot to hacks. So how, we've talked a little bit about scams, and thank you for sharing all of those. To me, it sounds like most of these scams that are being committed are not crypto native. They're traditional scams that have happened, for, years. As technology changes, the scammers adapt to use that technology, to leverage that technology, if you will, to get the money for themselves. So, but looking at, custody and keeping your money on the blockchain, can you speak to some of the hacks that happen that people hear about on Twitter, and how can, me as a consumer or anyone as a consumer, prevent those hacks from getting to them, or prevent them from having their monies taken off the blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're totally right. None of these scams are new to crypto. It's just, there's scammers in everything, right? Yep. And any new technology is going to look like a new opportunity to scammers. In terms of hacks, there's been sort of an evolution in hacking. Back in sort of the early days of crypto, centralized exchanges were primarily the targets of hacking. So, for example, the Mt. Gox hack that happened in 2014, that was a Japanese cryptocurrency exchange, and that's actually how our company got its start. Was one of our co-founders, Michael Groninger, who was working at another cryptocurrency exchange at the time, figured, the blockchain is public. We could probably figure out some algorithm to follow the money that came out of Mt. Gox and figure out, where has all of this money gone? And that's the basis of our tools now. And for a while, the hacks that we saw were targeting centralized exchanges. And as centralized exchanges figured out how to improve their security, and those were no longer good targets, and as DeFi became a much bigger part of the crypto ecosystem, in 2020 we saw DeFi summer, that became, in particular because of its open nature, all of the protocols are open, a much more attractive target. And unfortunately, you have these nation-state actors, in particular North Korea, who have focused on hacking activities. So we see a lot of hacks that are focused on DeFi protocols. So we have, in March of last year, one of the biggest hacks that we've seen in DeFi was the Axie Infinity hack. And this was, Axie Infinity is a gaming platform. And what happened was DPRK hackers got control of, I think, 5 out of 9 of the private keys of the Ronin bridge that they were using, and were able to then confirm transactions and steal $660 million. Which I think was the largest hack. It's probably still the largest hack that we've seen. So that was a really big and concerning event. However, I will say, thanks to the fact that cryptocurrency is transparent, Chainalysis was able to work with law enforcement partners, and we were able to trace a lot of those funds. We continue to trace those funds, and we've been able to get back a portion of those funds from the hackers. So we'll continue to monitor that and try to help them get that back, but there have been, a number of successes there. In terms of protecting yourself as an individual, make sure you have 2-factor authentication on with your account. If you have accounts at centralized exchanges, double check links, like I said. Just be careful and cautious at all times.
I know Chainalysis usually posts blogs frequently, and there was one that highlighted that since January 2022, scam revenue has fallen. The cumulative number of individual transfers to scams so far in 2022 is the lowest it's been in the last 4 years. Why is that? What do you think is causing this decline?
This might be a silver lining of the crypto winter, is that crypto scamming is less appealing to scammers. because there's less to be made there. And so they're looking at other avenues instead. Scammers go where the money is. And if it doesn't look like you're going to be able to make a lot of profits, then maybe that isn't the right target.
So in thinking about that, since it is crypto winter still, this is a really good opportunity for people to learn more about why the markets are down, why different coins are fluctuating. Just thinking about that, how can we encourage financial literacy to keep the scam revenue down? So it's not just because of crypto winter, it's because people are adequately, arming themselves with information to ward off the scammers.
Yeah, absolutely. We've worked with a number of public sector entities. The state of Vermont, for example, we've worked with their Department of Financial Services to put together a number of financial literacy videos, which you can find on their YouTube. They're short and sweet. They're very fun and digestible if you're interested in looking those up on their site. Like I mentioned, we have a public academy, Chainalysis, or academy.chainalysis.com. And we partner with a lot of different public and private sector entities to do education and training. And I believe you mentioned as well, we also have a crypto capstone course that we have launched. If you are a sophomore or junior in college, we are accepting applications right now for this. So it's a week-long course for college students, and you take a number of trainings in cryptocurrency, and you come out with certifications from Chainalysis.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be cognizant of the time, but did we have any questions from the audience?
Oh, hi. We've talked a lot today, or you guys have talked a lot today about, crypto using the generic term, but obviously there are lots of different cryptos. And so to what extent is that part of the educational conversation, which is, it's not just that to invest, you purchase a stock, right? Which stocks you purchase makes a big difference in how your investments perform. And so in that same function, how is that part of the conversation of education that needs to be taking place, which is analyzing what crypto and what is it about the different cryptos that would be most important in your analysis as an individual?
I'm not necessarily an expert in different cryptocurrencies, and I'm not this is not financial advice. I should have said that.
Not financial advice.
Not financial or legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Neither am I. You're in good company.
But I think that that's something where there's a lot of different resources in particular on the exchanges that sell them, and then on the different projects. You do have to be careful. Make sure you're looking at the actual project's website. It's a scam we didn't get to.
Yes.
But there's a lot of resources out there. Circle and Robinhood, I'm sure, both have a lot of resources with videos about specific cryptocurrencies and how they're used, how those tokens can be used, whether that comes with voting rights, if it's a DAO, and whether that's something that you're interested in versus a stable coin. So yeah, there's lots of different resources out there.
I would encourage you to read the white paper of the token that's being issued, just because you learn so much about its promises and its goals and whether or not you want to walk on that journey. So for if you're equating it to a stock, it'd be like reading a 10K. Where you're like, okay, well, I'm looking at all of these financial statements and I'm looking at its missions and its values. Do I want to invest in this company, or do I want to pass?
Any other questions? I do have one question. I'm a big proponent that self-custody. VPNs. Talk a bit about the value of a VPN.
VPNs are very important because they help to hide your traffic from anyone who might be if you're using public Wi-Fi, for example. I don't know if anyone's connected to the Wi-Fi here, but they help to protect your Wi-Fi from anyone who might be monitoring your traffic and who could be collecting all of the things that you're typing, including your passwords. So that's definitely a way that you can help to protect yourself as you're signing into, like, don't do this, but sign into bank accounts on public Wi-Fi. Don't do that.
I have a quick question regarding a fraud that I've heard of, but I'm wondering how much, if any, activity you've seen in this space, where they'll effectively take a letter from another language that's identical to a letter in, say, the English language, and make that part of a URL. So you can read the URL, everything looks on point, you get to a mimic website, you enter your login information, and we can fill in the blanks from there.
Yeah, like the letter L and then 1, depending on whether it's a sans serif or not, is a really good example of that, definitely. Yeah, so, and hovering over URLs to see, like, does it look weird? Does it change at all? Because it might show that difference because your script, your font on your computer might be different. So it might then show you, wait a second, there's something off here. But you're right, that's definitely another tactic that's used.
And is that something you've seen a lot of activity in? I, for one, I just don't click links. As a rule, I'll type it in, or I'll go to the site and navigate to it.
That's definitely a best practice, going to the site and going directly from there.
So one of the companies I'm really excited about that I've been watching is Blowfish. Are you familiar with them? They're
familiar with the shoes from like the early 2000s, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Different direction. So they do transaction testing, and I'm curious if you've seen anything like this, where if you're interacting with a wallet you've never interacted with before, it sends a fraction of a cent to see what the smart contract's going to do, and then reports back to you. Have you seen anything else like that in the ecosystem of things companies are doing? Because I mean, I personally got hacked when I hit a sell link on OpenSea, and this smart contract opens up that looks like a bunch of lines of code from the Matrix. I don't know, and I hit accept. So are you seeing other efforts like that in the industry?
I have heard of other efforts. I'm not sure that I don't know the names off the top of my head, but I could definitely follow up with you. And I think that those are really great and important efforts. And I think that the industry is doing a lot of leadership there. One thing we didn't talk about is an initiative that we did with MetaMask. They had identified this scam activity that was happening because people were reporting it to them. It was these links that they were clicking. They were trying to send funds to a mining pool. Mm-hmm. And what was happening was that it wasn't actually a mining pool. It was just a scam. So they thought they were buying into a mining pool, and they had been told that in order to claim their proceeds, they had to pay gas fees, basically. But it was just a scam. And what would happen is they clicked the link and it would authorize the scam to empty their wallet. And so MetaMask had identified, I think, 60 or so different wallets. They'd put out a blog on this. They'd put out a Twitter post. And they'd been doing a really good job of educating on this. But they reached out to us and said, like, can you help us identify who's doing this and get this labeled in your system so that on the compliance end, if people are trying to cash out these proceeds, exchanges won't let them because it'll be marked as stolen funds. And so our investigations team did a workup of this, and they were able to identify, in addition to the 60 addresses that MetaMask had found and reported, 1,000 other addresses that were associated with the scammers. And then you can also see who's been sending to those addresses, right? So they identified, I think it was 11,000 victims. And so that was something that we were able to help get labeled in the compliance tools so that exchanges will know that that's a scam. They won't cash out those funds. That's where they'll file a SAR, they'll freeze those accounts. So there's a lot of industry.
Right. Well, so my follow-up question was going to be, have you seen any kind of structuring where a smart contract might behave one way if you send them a fraction of a cent and behave a different way if you send them $1,000, but that's for down the road, I guess. Yeah, I guess the one follow-up question I have, because I'm very excited about any industry efforts to like bolster consumer protection. I know that some people in the TradFi space, when they hear a stolen NFT will never be returned to you, or maybe I'm just speaking of my own trauma from getting hacked. But is there any efforts that you're aware of where using the tactics that you're talking about, where you can freeze transactions, that a stolen NFT could be returned to its rightful owner?
Well, I think there have been a lot of law enforcement successes there. HSI New York, I think, had the first successful seizure of stolen NFTs. I think it was Frosties. I might be getting the project wrong, but there were NFTs that had been stolen, and they were able to seize them and get them back to the victim. This was probably a year or so ago. So that's an interesting.
So there's hope for me getting my Murakami flowers back.
Sorry?
There's hope for me getting my Murakami flowers back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank
Have
you.
you reported it to all of those agencies?
I'll do that after this conference.
I'll give you the list again. And I want to say, because I've just like, I feel like this was just like lots of scary information. But Chainalysis puts out reports on the illicit activity that we're seeing in cryptocurrency, and we build compliance and investigations tools. But we put out reports on the level of illicit activity, and it's very low, despite all of the scary information I've just given you. The estimate that we have is that 0.25%, 0.24% of the transaction volume in cryptocurrency is illicit activity. So you should be careful with all investments, crypto or not, but most cryptocurrency activity is legitimate. And don't be that afraid of this.
So with that in mind, I just had one last question. You know, if you're a high schooler or in college, or you're a young professional and you're trying to navigate this space, what are some best practices to make sure that you're aware of, you know, conducting transactions in the right way, not being susceptible to scams?
Do your homework about the exchanges that you're using. You should read the terms of service. I'm sorry. I also don't enjoy doing that. But you should read the terms of service. You should, if you're not comfortable with using the centralized exchange to custody your assets, you should do your homework about what type of hardware wallet or paper wallet, software wallet you want to use, and make sure you're really comfortable with how it works, so that you don't accidentally mess up in using it. And then do your research. Like you said, read the white papers, decide what you want to invest in, and, you know, have fun.
Thank you so much for your time, Clark, and this was wonderful. Thank you all for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Well, it definitely sounds on April 11, we need to bring Clark back so she could go through the other list of scams. Because I think we got enthralled in like, oh, so. And on April 11th, we will actually do a session on self-custody. We know how daunting that can be. And so it will be a workshop for people who participate will actually get to leave with a cold storage wallet, but at least they'll learn how to self-custody. And we might do a VPN demonstration as well. But I think one of the important points that Clark made is the fact that when you are victimized, your crypto is stolen, you should report it to those various agencies, because I know people who have been able to, they got a call from the DOJ saying, we recovered some of your Bitcoins and got some of it back. So obviously this conversation about risk is so very important. It's something we need to lean into. It's not sexy, you know, it's not going to be like, oh my God, FOMO, let me get there. But it's one where we have to deepen these conversations and have them more often. So I want to thank our virtual audience for participating, those who were able to join us on this rainy DC, you know, Wednesday, I think it's Wednesday, but also our speakers who actually shared their content. As you can see, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people working on just this whole issue of how do we increase financial literacy, but also make sure people have the tools to mitigate risk. And really quickly, one of the projects that are for early warning, right? There's a few projects being developed. One of them is Rectify, REKTIFY. Rectify.ai is actually intended for help wallet holders identify a risk before it occurs. So, but on April 11th, we'll have some of those projects come and actually talk about some of the tools they're developing. But thank you everyone for participating. I do want to thank FIU for giving us their beautiful space and being such a tremendous partner and making sure that this conversation actually had the platform to be heard virtually and in person. So thank you, FIU. Thank you for our attendees, and we will see you all on April 11th.